Chapter 34. According to the usual practice at number 59 high school's student exchange meet, after Tang Jing's speech, the guests from other schools had to send representatives to conclude the meeting. In fact, no one had heard what Tang Jingza had said at all, because in less than an hour, this exchange meet had gone out of control for a full 50 minutes. There were only 5 minutes left for Tang Jingza to speak. Furthermore, it wasn't just silence in these 5 minutes. There was still the constant buzzing of voices in Tang Jingza's ears like flies. Normally, Tang Jingza would have flown into a rage long ago. But now, especially with people from other schools here, Tang Jingza had no choice but to swallow his anger. This was to ensure that he had the demeanor of the president of the student union. There were only 5 minutes left until the end of the meeting. Tang Jingza looked at his watch. He hadn't even finished 1/30th of his carefully prepared speech. He gritted his teeth and looked at Lotus Sunday now. Let us invite number 60 high school's representative, student Lotus Sun, to speak. Thunderous applause filled the venue. Knowing that it was time for Lotus Sun to speak, the hot-blooded boys of number 59 high school quickly quieted down after a round of polite applause. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Tang Jingza was so angry that he almost spat out blood. It had taken him a full 50 minutes to control the situation, but it was actually no match for the name Lotus Sun. Damn it! Tang Jingza got up, moved to a seat on the side, and quickly pressed the broadcast button. Lotus Sun's voice would be broadcast to every corner of the school. If Lotus Sun was at a loss for words, someone might record it and turn it into a topic of conversation over tea and dinner. There were only 5 minutes left. Let's see what you can pull out. Lotus Sun walked calmly to the front of the stage and tucked back her long hair. Even from a distance, Wang Ling could smell her sweet fragrance. She bowed slightly to the students in the audience with great confidence. Then, she gracefully sat down in the seat that Tang Jingza had vacated, adjusted her tone, and said lightly, "Hello everyone. I'm the vice president of number 60 high school's student union, as well as the class monitor of grade 1, class 3, Lotus Sunday." This voice was completely different from Lotus Sun's usual tone. It was clear that she had practiced it. Her soft and sweet voice was mixed with a faint broadcasting accent. Her lips and teeth moved in every frown and smile. It was just an introduction, but her voice actually had a soothing and quiet feeling. It wasn't just the students of number 59 high school. Even Wang Ling and the others were slightly startled. I didn't expect classmate Lotus Sun to have such a nice voice when she's serious. As expected of the National Campus Belle, she's practically on par with voice actresses. Below the stage, the students of number 59 high school whispered to each other. Lotus Sun smiled slightly and continued, "It's a great honor for our number 60 high school delegation to be invited to participate in the student exchange meet at number 59 high school this time. In the last 50 minutes, as the president of number 59 high school students, student Tang Jingza has set a very good example." The corners of Tang Jingza and Fang Huaqing's mouths twitched involuntarily. This was 2F** King ridiculous. Super Chun, Hirogua, and Featherlin couldn't help covering their mouths and snickering. Wang Ling did his best to maintain his poker face, even though he had to admit that Lotus Sun's voice was indeed very pleasant when she was serious. Lotus Sun took her time to speak. The representatives of both sides had a cordial and friendly conversation at the meeting. We exchanged views. We improved our understanding of each other. The discussion was beneficial. We maintained number 60 high school's attitude. Similarly, we respect number 59 high school's opinion and commend student Tang Jingza for his contribution to the maintenance of the school's environment. Outside the school building, Old Antique couldn't help snickering when he heard Lotus Sun's voice over the school broadcast, and his eyes narrowed into slits. When all was said and done, she was the successor cultivated by Huaguo Water Curtain Group. Speaking ironic words with a straight face and ruthlessly criticizing number 59 high school, without a single word, was really brilliant. When it came to broadcasting, Lotus Sun had really practiced it. This was a compulsory course for Huaguo Water Curtain Group's family business management. At a very young age, Lotus Sun had received this kind of business management education. When it came to broadcasting skills, Lotus Sun had long since obtained a state-level language certificate in Huaxiao Nation. Not only was her voice sweet and balanced, she was also very adaptable. Tang Jing's attempt to make things difficult for Lotus Sun in this kind of place clearly paled in comparison. Every formidable broadcaster had a stopwatch in their hearts that could accurately calculate the time to increase or decrease their speaking speed. Of course, it was the same for Lotus Sunday, estimating that there were less than 30 seconds left. Lotus Sun smiled slightly and swiftly moved on to the closing stage. At the same time, we express our deep regret for number 59 High School's 12 spirit gathering arrays that were damaged in one day. I hope that in the future, our two schools can interact more and deepen our friendship, and make greater contributions to the harmonious development of our students. Ding-ling-ling. The bell rang, and it just so happened to be the end of the third afternoon class. It was exactly 5 minutes, not a minute more, not a minute less. Thank you, everyone. Lotus Sun heaved a long sigh of relief, straightened her back and bowed again. Every movement was flawless. It was impossible to pick out any flaws at all. Then Tang Jingza heard a roar of applause. Clap, 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 clap. Even the teachers who were listening to the broadcast in their offices couldn't help clapping. Although they didn't understand what on earth had happened in the venue, everyone who heard Lotus Sun's speech felt that this exchange conference had been a great success. Almost all the boys in the venue stood up and applauded and cheered for Lotus Sunday. I don't know what classmate Lotus Sun is talking about, but it's awesome. F***CK. In comparison, our guild leader is nothing but a rune. Goddess Lotus Sun's voice is so beautiful. Why did they have to leave so much time for Tang Jingza? It was a waste of life. I strongly request that the goddess come to our number 59 high school for another meeting. This was the power of Lotus Sun's domain. Once the domain was activated, it could affect 95% of the people within its range. Although not everyone was convinced by Lotus Sun's words, but Wang Ling felt that in some sense, this ability that swallowed both men and women could even be weighted with realms, which was really too awesome. On the other side, with Lotus Sun at the center, the whole venue was clear and boundless. On the other side, dark clouds gathered above Tang Jingza and the others' heads. Wang Ling just felt that his face was so black that it was unsightly to the extreme. It was like rotten pig liver that had been stepped on by a pair of boots rolling in muddy water. This was clearly his own school, and as the president of the student union, he had actually allowed someone from another school to steal the limelight on his own turf. Tang Jingza gnashed his teeth hatefully. No matter what, he was going to make this bunch of number 60 high people pay back double for the face he had lost today. After all, this was just the first day. There were still 3 whole days left. Chapter 35. It was already dusk, and Tang Jingza was writing a report in the student union office with a bitter and hateful expression, as well as a reflection on gross negligence on the first day of the exchange meeting with number 60 high school. The 3,000-word exchange report and 5,000-word reflection on gross negligence couldn't be typed, and had to be written by hand. He wasn't allowed to go home until he finished it. F***K. Ever since he was a child, he had never been detained by a teacher. Tang Jingza was so angry that he broke the fountain pen in his hand, and ink splattered all over Fang Huaqing's face. Fang Huaqing took out a wet napkin and wiped his face, revealing a helpless expression. Boss, this is already the 32nd fountain pen. There's no need to make life difficult for the fountain pen. The fountain pen is the school's public property. They are also included in the regulations governing school property and public facilities. This bunch of people from number 60 high school is really strange. Faced with Tang Jingza's roar, Fang Huaqing covered his face with a headache. According to the school work department's response, in addition to the 12 spirit gathering arrays that had exploded, the rest of the school's public facilities had also been damaged to varying degrees. As small as the newly repaired broadcast equipment, as large as the holographic projectors in the computer room. Although they weren't as thoroughly damaged as the spirit gathering arrays, all of them had black screens for unknown reasons and couldn't be turned on. In the short one day that number 60 high school had visited, number 59 high school had suffered heavy losses. 40% of the school's public facilities alone had already been damaged. When he had first seen the damage report, Tang Jingze had taken a deep breath. This wasn't a F***King exchange meeting, but a demolition party. He even wondered if this bunch of people from number 60 high school had grown up in a demolition office. On the side, Liang Wei frowned and said, I heard that they seem to be going to Student Street later. Should we get someone to take revenge on them? Revenge? With what? Tang Jingze rolled his eyes. It would be easy to deal with Lotus Sun in school. But it was already after school. Tang Jingze realized that he had no way to fight back. As the young miss of Huaguo Water Curtain Group, she was protected by bodyguards who followed her around in secret. In particular, after the Xiao family compound incident and the Shadow Stream assassination attempt, the bodyguard lineup had probably been reorganized and upgraded. It didn't take a genius to know that the secret guards following Lotus Sun were all like Jinshan poison tyrants who couldn't be gotten rid of. Even a mosquito wouldn't be able to get close. This is a tough bone to chew, but we don't need to target Lotus Sun alone. Liang Wei thought for a moment and said, according to the information we gathered previously, combining the information on the others, the remaining Super Chun was actually also a second-generation rich kid. Hirogua's family ran a pet shop, but it seemed that he also had a political background. Featherlin seemed to be very close to Lotus Sun and wasn't easy to deal with. All that's left is... Hearing this, Tang Jingze gritted his teeth. Only that pretty boy who drinks fruit juice is left. This fruit and vegetable juice drinker definitely doesn't have any background. He lives in the suburbs and seems to be very poor. He only brought a wooden sword with him to the spiritual sword exchange meet. That's him. Tang Jingze slammed the table. He was the only pushover among the 5 of them. Even an idiot would know that he was looking for a pushover. He couldn't possibly go and find a durian, right? At the same time, he couldn't help sneezing. It was free time in the evening. After having dinner in the canteen, the number 60 high school students planned to go for a stroll on the student street near number 59 high school. Because the school building hadn't officially opened yet, the caretaker gave the access card to Lotus Sun before he got off work and went home to nurse the baby. Wang Ling had wanted to refuse at first, but just as he was about to do so, his eyelids started to twitch violently again. It wasn't until he completely gave up on the idea of refusing to go shopping that he calmed down. All right, he couldn't run away from going shopping. When he had difficulty choosing, Wang Ling often judged whether he had made the right choice by whether or not his eyelids twitched. But this was also risky, because the eyelid twitch warning passive skill could only make judgments based on the current choice. It couldn't predict what would happen while they were shopping. Wang Ling wouldn't be able to predict in advance if something unexpected happened while they were shopping. Old Antique was a lazy person and didn't want to join in on the fun. After seeing everyone off at the school gate, he gave each of them a spirit talisman. Students, this is a soul summoning talisman. If there's any danger, you can use it to summon me at any time. Student Lotus Sun will lead the team. And try not to split up. Come back early after you're done shopping. All right, thank you, Teacher Wang. We're just taking a walk. We'll be back soon. They accepted the spirit talismans and nodded in unison. Old Antique nodded and didn't say anything else. Less than a dozen meters away, Old Antique, who had already turned his back on them, tilted his head slightly and said telepathically, "Oh, that's right. I heard that there's a gang on Student Street that specializes in pengxi. Everyone should pay attention." A gang that specializes in pengxi? Everyone stared blankly. No matter how they heard it, Wang Ling felt that this sounded like a flag. Sure enough, not long after Old Antique said this, Wang Ling's eyelids started to twitch in a very cooperative manner. Disaster level 2 stars. It was hard to be a human being, but it was even harder to be a low-key person. Wang Ling had never wanted to stand out or be a hero. For someone like him, who had faced all kinds of challenges and disasters, it wasn't easy to finish the rest of his studies in a down-to-earth manner. Number 59 High School was pretty close to Student Street. It would take a group of foundation establishment students 20 minutes on foot. Moreover, in order to avoid encountering malicious scammers, no one even dared to ride the ferry bicycle on the roadside. As they walked down the street, Hirogwa suddenly said, "Actually, I've heard a little about the background of this Pengsi gang." Hearing this, Wang Ling silently pursed his lips, his expression cold. "Is there anything in this world that you, Master of Dopey, don't know? The members of the Pengsi gang are mostly unemployed old men and women in their 70s or 80s. Ever since the country strictly prohibited people from taking up space in public squares to perform square dancing, the public square has become more and more popular. More and more old men and women are encouraged by criminals to join gangs. I still remember when the Pengsi gang was established, the various cultivation police stations didn't pay much attention to it. Moreover, they are a bunch of old men and old women. Most of them are looking for excitement. Everyone was surprised when they heard this. These days, there were a lot of naughty kids who liked to play extreme sports and seek death in fancy ways. He did not expect that these old men and women, who should have been living like princes in nursing homes and thinking of romantic relationships, every day would join the thrill-seeking queue. The naughty brat of the past, the old man of the present. After thinking about it carefully, Wang Ling felt that there was nothing wrong with this. Hirogwa said, "Actually, they don't care about money at all. If they can blackmail them, they do. If they can't, they obediently return the money. At most, they'll be educated in the detention center and then released. It's just that in the last 2 years, the Pengsi gang has developed at an outrageous speed. It's almost on par with the Han and Wang family armies. The Pengsi gang branch on this student street seems to have only recently expanded." Sure enough, it was all because of square dancing. At this point, they had already reached the end of the street. Colorful street lights illuminated the bustling student street in front of them. There were food stalls, stationery stores, and even a video game city to provide additional recreational activities for students. On Student Street, the food stalls were very cheap, and you didn't have to spend much money to eat your fill. Furthermore, as long as you showed your student ID, you could enjoy a half-price discount for more than 90% of recreational activities. There were student streets near all 3 schools in Peiyuan District, but the one near number 59 High School was the largest. This is simply heaven. Superchun could no longer contain his excitement. Previously, he had taken a fancy to a hovershoe online. It was only available in limited quantities in the student street area. Superchun felt that he might be able to find a style he liked here. Lotus Sun simply wanted to take a walk to maintain her figure. Feather Lin was more concerned about whether there would be a new volume of Fujoshi's daily life in high school. Looking at the main road calmly, Master of Dopey patted his chest confidently. "Don't worry, everyone. As long as we don't use public transport, there won't be any problems." Wang Ling was a little flustered. What kind of strange flag was this? Chapter 36. After receiving Liang Wei's assignment, the old lady of the Pengsi gang had been crouching behind the haystack for a long time. The moment the people from number 60 high school approached, she immediately locked onto Wang Ling amidst the army. She was just an ordinary old lady without any realm. Because of her sagging skin and old age, her thick eyelids were completely wrinkled and drooped to cover most of her eyes. However, this obstruction of sight wasn't enough to stop the old lady from scamming Wang Ling. She was the client's designated target, and the experienced old Madame Dong perfectly displayed her expertise in scamming over many years. As one of the 4 great elders of the Peiyuan district branch of the Pengsi gang, old Madame Dong didn't have any realm, but to be able to support herself to this point after so many years, she had gradually become one of the great elders acknowledged by the handsome old men and beautiful old ladies in the gang. There had to be something about her that made her outstanding. First, old Madame Dong had amazing eyesight. She was over 70 years old, but her eyesight was as precise as an eagle's. This was an ability that ordinary old men and women with presbyopia were in awe of. She could quickly lock onto the client's designated scammer target from the crowd and accurately carry out her revenge campaign. Second, old Madame Dong had actually been a top student when she was young. Of course, she didn't think it was anything to brag about. But it was precisely because of this that old Madame Dong's status as an elder had been consolidated. The moment Wang Ling appeared in her line of sight, Old Madame Dong immediately estimated the speed and distance between them. She estimated that there was a distance of 20 meters between them. Wang Ling was now strolling forward at a speed of 6 meters per second. Then, as long as she dashed out from behind a tree at a speed of 4 meters per second. And so 2 seconds later, everyone saw an old lady stumble up to Wang Ling, throw away her walking stick with a clatter, and grab Wang Ling's trouser leg. Her whole body twitched, and her expression was one of extreme pain. Wang Ling never thought that he would actually run into a scammer. When he had entered the gate between worlds to save old Li and the others, all the demon beasts that had encountered him had been turned into a pile of dregs by the backlash. It was just that the talisman seal on his arm was about to expire, which limited a lot of his strength. In addition, the old lady herself didn't have much strength. Otherwise, if the talisman seal had really expired in 2 days, Wang Ling thought that this old lady would probably have instantly turned into a pile of fine powder. Of course, he wasn't thinking of helping the old lady up. He had never been able to control the strength of his hands. Moreover, this old lady did not have any cultivation. If she was not careful, it would not be good for her to break her arm. "Granny, are you okay?" Lotus Sun crouched down and asked softly. Although everyone in number 60 high clearly knew in their hearts that this old lady was deliberately trying to blackmail them, the norm in this civilized society had always been that the weaker party was in the right. It was now the spirit energy information era, and quality education had long been popularized among cultivators. Before this era, who would dare to cheat under the feet of cultivators? It would be a miracle if he didn't get chopped into 2. The old lady's acting was very realistic. She fell to the ground and twitched crazily. She was stunned for a long time, as if she was having an epileptic seizure. It wasn't until Lotus Sun and Feather Lin had repeated the greeting no less than 10 times that the old lady turned over shakily and pointed weakly at Wang Ling, gasping for breath. You. Hero Gua and Super Chun were startled, their faces full of question marks. These days, the acting skills of faking an accident were really good. But it seemed they weren't very professional. In the past, those old men and women who had tried to blackmail Wang Ling had used all their strength to crawl under the wheels of their cars. But now, forget a car. They didn't even have a bicycle with 2 wheels. And yet she was actually accusing Wang Ling of blackmail in the dark and windy night under the bright moonlight? Hero Gua pursed his lips. "Granny, you have to be reasonable. We didn't use any means of transportation. How can you say that my classmate is blackmailing you?" If this blackmailer had just been an ordinary old man or woman, they might have been scared out of their wits by Hero Gua's aggressive questioning. But as an elder of the Peiyuan district branch of the Pengxi gang, Madame Dong was in the end Madame Dong. Even when she was blackmailing someone, she had to do it differently to reflect the characteristics of an elder of the Pengxi gang. From Madame Dong's calm and composed eyes, everyone in number 60 high school seemed to already understand. It was obvious that this old lady was already a veteran of many battles. In the face of Hero Gua's powerful questioning, Madame Dong sat paralyzed on the ground and slowly extended an index finger to point at Wang Ling. She looked very weak as she said, It's him. He violated me with coercion." Coercion. Everyone was instantly enlightened. F***K. This was a new blackmail routine. Hero Gua dropped his forehead deeply into his hand. Sure enough, the older the wiser. No one had thought that someone could blackmail them in this way. "How about we call the police?" Feather Lin was completely helpless. "Call the police?" Madame Dong snorted. "Do you know how many people there are in our Pengxi gang? If you can get this classmate to obediently pay up, I'll let this matter go." "Then how much do you want?" Lotus Sun sighed. Anything that could be solved with money wasn't a problem for her at all. The old lady held out her hand. "I don't want much, just pay me 5 million first." 5 million. Although this wasn't a lot for Lotus Sun, it wasn't something that she could take out right away. Lotus Sun could already tell that this old lady wasn't just blackmailing them, but was purely looking for trouble. "Why don't you just rob someone?" Superchin couldn't take it anymore. It was only after he said it that he realized what he had said was wrong. This old lady was actually robbing someone. and the kind that would swallow someone whole without spitting out the bones. Before the little friends could recover from their shock, the old lady pointed at Wang Ling and said, "Also, I only want this classmate to pay up. I don't want any compensation from the rest of the students. We blackmail people with professionalism." Featherlin felt that her 3 views had been refreshed. Nowadays, even blackmail people had started to pay attention to professionalism. This great Qing was going to die. "Let's call the police and put this old lady in jail while we're at it." Hirogwa sighed helplessly. "Hee, you want to put me in jail? You've got guts." The old lady smiled mockingly. "Why don't you give me a reason first?" Hirogwa rolled his eyes. "You indiscriminately grabbed my classmate's trousers. As the saying goes, men and women shouldn't touch each other. Although you're already old, you're still a woman, right? Does this count as child molestation? If this goes to a cultivation court, it's a serious crime." Wang Ling. The corners of Madame Dong's mouth twitched violently. "Child molestation? Is your child 8 meters tall? Isn't this a giant baby?" Obviously, Madame Dong didn't buy it. "Even if you put me in the police station, I'll be able to come out in 2 days. But you have to be careful, my Pengsi gang's territory is everywhere in the country. If this classmate pays up, I won't pursue the matter. But if she can't, then our gang's head elder will personally collect the debt. You dare threaten us?" Lotus Sun glared at Madame Dong fiercely. This was the first time she had met someone who was so unreasonable. "Do you know that I am?" Lotus Sun wanted to say, "Do you know who I am?" But before she could finish speaking, Wang Ling slowly took 2 steps forward and stood in front of her. Because at that moment, Wang Ling had already read Madame Dong's memories clearly. Since Liang Wei and the others had specially hired her to target him, Wang Ling naturally didn't want to implicate other people. Chapter 37. Ruffians and scoundrels in society always like to pretend to be weak in order to win sympathy and reap benefits. It was clear that Madame Dong was such a person. There were many ways to deal with Madame Dong. Given Wang Ling's current realm, he could send the old lady up into the atmosphere in the blink of an eye, through outer space, and then directly into the Milky Way, so that she could live side by side with the sun for the rest of her life. Or, an even simpler method was to directly open the heavenly eye and summon the inner flames of a star and scatter the ashes on the spot. But Wang Ling didn't want to be nosy. Except for those shadow stream killers who regarded human life as dirt, Wang Ling had never personally killed anyone. Growing up, Father and Mother Wang had taught him that students should act like students, not think about standing out, and be down to earth in their studies. The most important thing was to abide by the core values of cultivation. This was the spirit energy information era. And in the scientific cultivation era, killing people wouldn't solve any problems. In the end, Madame Dong waved her sleeves and left with a suitcase in her arms, satisfied and content. "I never thought that young people nowadays would be so generous." Madame Dong sighed in her heart and was wild with joy. A whole 5 million. Even if she bumped into porcelain on this street for more than 10 years, she wouldn't have gained as much in one night. Wang Ling watched Madame Dong leave with an indifferent expression on his face. The Pengsi gang might seem difficult to deal with, but in the end, they still couldn't beat his great illusion spell. Madame Dong thought that she was holding a suitcase full of cash. But in fact, it was nothing more than a clumsy broken stone. Keep a low profile. Handle it carefully. Since this was a problem that could be solved with a divine power, Wang Ling's principle had always been to avoid violence if he could. Otherwise, if they really fought, the city would collapse. And if worse came to worst, the earth would be destroyed. This wasn't what Wang Ling wanted to see. This time, Wang Ling used 2 divine powers in total. The first was the Great Illusion spell on Madame Dong. The second divine ability was used on the stone that Madame Dong was holding. This spell was called the Great Truth Spell, and had an extremely powerful brainwashing effect. Once Madame Dong brought the stone back to the Pengsi gang, the core cultivation values that Wang Ling had carved into the stone would immediately activate. Prosperity, democracy, civilization, harmony, freedom, equality, justice, rule of law, patriotism, dedication, integrity, friendliness. At that time, all the scammers would be purified by the 24 mantras. Watching Madame Dong's back disappear at the end of the road, Wang Ling couldn't help sighing in his heart. It really wasn't King easy for him for all these people. Why did the old lady leave with a rock in her arms? This scene was a little confusing to the little companions. Maybe it's because of the ban on square dancing, coupled with the fact that his children are unfilial, and his unhappy life in his later years. He was mentally stimulated. Feather Lin analyzed seriously. Lotus Sun also shook her head. If the spiritual world of the elderly is rich enough, who would deliberately try to cheat in order to find excitement? Therefore, after a heated discussion, everyone came to a conclusion. In the end, it was all the system's fault. It was all the world's fault. Wednesday of the third week of school, 8 in the morning. Liang Wei returned to the student union office with a swollen face, because he had been beaten up by the old men and women of the Pengxi gang. The lumps on his head were like several small Wangzai steamed buns, stacked on top of each other. Even Tang Jingze was stupefied for a good while when he saw it. "Student, who are you looking for?" "Liang Wei." Fang Huaqing pushed up his glasses. Although Liang Wei looked miserable at the moment, and had a pile of Wangzai steamed buns of various sizes on his head, Fang Huaqing could still see through the appearance and recognize Liang Wei from his iconic big lips. "What happened to you?" Liang Wei covered his face and wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He wailed in grief and indignation. "I was beaten up." "What on earth happened?" Tang Jingze asked. Liang Wei took out a local morning newspaper and slapped it on the table. Then, Tang Jingze saw the eye-catching and bolded headline on the densely packed newspaper. Today's front-page news. The Peiyuan District Pengxi gang revolted last night. The old men and women turned themselves into the police one after another, and sang praises of the core cultivation values. The corner of Tang Jingze's mouth twitched. No one knew what on earth had gotten into this bunch of old men and women. Under old Madame Dong's leadership, they had successfully instigated a rebellion overnight, turning themselves in. Under old Madame Dong's leadership, the entire Peiyuan District Pengxi gang branch threatened to break away from the main Pengxi gang and change its name to the General Administration of Harmony. At the thought of what had happened last night, even a grown man like Liang Wei couldn't help his eyes turning red with grievance. As the employer, when Liang Wei had hired old Madame Dong yesterday, he had already arranged a meeting place for this morning. He had planned to personally check on the results. But what Liang Wei had never expected was that halfway there, old Madame Dong would lead a group of muscular old men and surround him in a small corner. By now, old Madame Dong's temperament was completely different from last night. She wore a red ribbon with the word harmony written on it on her arm. She glared at Liang Wei in a stern voice and muttered the 24 mantras. Liang Wei already couldn't remember what old Madame Dong had said at the time. After old Madame Dong finished reciting the 24 mantras, she took out a red book and began to read it aloud. In view of the fact that student Liang Wei maliciously hired a Pengxi gang and disturbed public order, I hereby announce the verdict of his trial. Then, with a wave of her hand, old Madame Dong bluntly declared him guilty. Crime of anti-cultivation harmony. Right after that, several muscular old men came over. Although old Madame Dong was an ordinary person, that didn't mean that there were no cultivators in the Pengxi gang. If it had been just old Madame Dong alone, Liang Wei would have been able to deal with her. Unfortunately, the 8 old men surrounding him were all at the foundation establishment stage. And then there was Liang Wei didn't even get to call out Yalai Dai before the 8 old men ruthlessly bullied him in turn, and he returned to school with a bloody nose and a swollen face. Tang Jingze, Fang Huaqing. Now Tang Jingze and Fang Huaqing really felt like they had seen a ghost. Since the arrival of that bunch of people from number 60 high school yesterday, there had been no end of trouble. Now, even this bunch of stubborn old men and women from the Pengxi gang had King set things right in one night. What the K was there left to play? Tang Jingze's heart was currently very complicated. His planned face-slapping operation had been countered by the opponent, and even his revenge plan had been repeatedly disrupted by some mysterious force. This was clearly their number 59 high school's territory. But in the end, Not only had this bunch of people from number 60 high school openly come in, they had even planted a red flag on their territory. This absolutely couldn't be tolerated. Gazing out the window, Tang Jingza sighed inwardly. Now that things have come to this, it looks like we can only ask that senior to step in. Speaking of that senior, Fang Huaqing and Liang Wei instantly understood. Given the current situation, they could only ask that senior for help, which was probably the only way for number 59 high school to turn the tables on them. Every school had at least one or two delinquents. Number 60 high school had one, and number 59 high school was naturally no exception. There were only 2 days left until the end of the exchange meet. Not only had Tang Jingza's humiliating plan against number 60 high school so far failed, it had even backfired. He had shot himself in the foot and smashed his own toes. In any case, there were still 2 days left, and Tang Jingza felt that it was necessary to win back face. In the morning, Tang Jingza and the members of the student union at number 59 high school found that legendary delinquent senior He Bufeng. The wind blows on campus, and there's a storm everywhere. This was the meaning behind this senior He's name. Overall, it was very much in line with this delinquent's style. In any case, just from his name, it was obvious that this senior always wanted to stir up big news and was an extremely restless existence. Tang Jingza actually didn't know much about this senior He's background. He only knew that this senior He Bufeng had a number code called 8823. This string of numbers didn't represent his student number, nor did it refer to anything in particular. Instead, it referred to the total number of marks this senior he had obtained in all subjects in the 3 years since the first batch of students enrolled until now, which was only 8823. This was a record low for number 59 high school. Furthermore, this record had yet to be broken. After all the exam subjects were now unified on a 1,000-point scale. From the start of school, there had been weekly tests, monthly tests, and so on, but the total score hadn't even broken 10,000, which sounded a little sensational. This year, it just so happened that this senior He Bufeng was repeating his 3rd year in Senior 3. All in all, this was a piece of sticky candy that even Director Xie felt was giving him a headache. If it wasn't for the fact that even Tang Jingza was at his wits' end this time, he wouldn't have asked this great god to stand up for the student union. In the morning, Tang Jingza used the student union's records to find this delinquent senior's number and arranged a meeting place. The men's toilet on the 2nd floor of the teaching building was this delinquent senior's territory. Students who knew the rules usually wouldn't enter this place of their own accord. Otherwise, it was very likely that this delinquent would force their heads into the toilet bowl to wash their faces. As the president of the student union, Tang Jingza had naturally received a lot of reports, but like most teachers, he had chosen to turn a blind eye to them. This was mainly because of this delinquent's background. Because He Bufeng's grandfather was the pretentious school director behind number 59 high school. With this layer of relationship here, this was also the reason why number 59 high school hadn't expelled this delinquent. You're the one who wants to meet Senior He? Tang Jingza and the others had just arrived on the 2nd floor when a teenager wearing a graffiti vest immediately called out to them. Tang Jingza glanced at this person's style. He was about 1.7 meters tall and didn't wear his school uniform jacket properly, instead tying the sleeves in a bow at his waist. The most eye-catching thing about him was his 10-centimeter long hair, which perfectly made up for the height gap between them. Even among all the punks, this hairstyle was as rare as phoenix feathers and Qilin horns, and was a terrifying existence. Tang Jingza, Fang Huaqing and Liang Wei all sucked in cold breaths of air at the same time. This style was really a bit of an eyesore. Senior, is it convenient right now? Tang Jingza asked softly. He felt that he was usually very bad and had bullied a lot of people. But in front of this delinquent senior, he didn't dare be careless at all. The punk snorted and pointed to the men's toilet on the side as he said with a smile, "Senior has been waiting inside for a long time. Go in." Chapter 38. Student exchanges between students were certainly one aspect of the exchange meet between the two schools. But discussions between teachers were also very important. It wasn't even 8 o'clock in the morning when Old Antique was dragged away for a meeting as the lead teacher of number 60 high school. Old Antique didn't recognize a single teacher in the entire venue. Old Antique could vaguely hear what the other teachers were saying about him through the murmurs in the air. Things like he was a bookworm in theory of history, who only knew how to teach without any ability at all. Actually, whether it was Old Antique as a teacher now or as a student back then, students who specialized in flying swords and talismans had always criticized the students who studied theory of history. Even though Old Antique was now a teacher, those who taught flying swords and talismans also looked down on those who taught history from the bottom of their hearts. They always felt that these people were very dull and didn't have any real talent. In private, Old Antique had always called this discrimination, stereotypes. Old Antique couldn't help thinking of his time as a student. He had heard a lot of gossip, so even when he heard it now, his expression was very calm, and he just sighed at how time passed by so quickly, and how it was impossible to return to those beautiful youthful days. The topic of discussion in the morning meeting between the two schools was naturally the disintegration of the Pengsi gang, which had been the hottest topic in the morning papers. This matter had blown up quite a bit. This was because the Peiyuan district branch of the Pengsi gang had always been a big problem for the cultivation police station in charge of this area. Now that it had been disintegrated overnight, the students and teachers had spread the news, and as they chatted, everyone found out. Teachers, quiet down. The regular meeting will now officially begin. The teacher presiding over the meeting was precisely number 59 high school's director Xia. Seeing that everyone is having such a heated discussion, I'm sure you've all heard about it. This incident happened very suddenly. Although there are still a small number of remnants of the Pengsi gang in Peiyuan district who are taking advantage of the situation to cause trouble. But for now, we don't have to worry about students scamming others when they're outside. The focus of this meeting was issued by the General Administration of 100 schools. As soon as the incident happened, we mainly want to hear what all the teachers think about Madame Dong's reorganization of the General Administration of Harmony after the disintegration of the Pengsi gang in our district. Head teacher Xia's words once again sparked a heated discussion. The teachers whispered to each other and discussed fervently. Her gaze fell on Old Antique, and she noticed that this theory of history teacher from another school was exceptionally quiet, as he silently listened to the opinions of the other teachers and nodded repeatedly with a gentle smile on his face. Director Xia's face inexplicably heated up. Some people agreed with the existence of the General Administration of Harmony and believed that it was beneficial. A male teacher nodded. Although the Pengsi gang has indeed made many mistakes in the past, destroying social harmony and civilization, and at the same time bringing heavy economic losses to the teachers and students in the surrounding areas. But now that the General Administration of Harmony had been reorganized, it specialized in opposing the Pengsi gang and supervising the bad behavior of society. I think it's great. A female teacher snorted and objected. What's so good about it? It was just a different method of harassment. When I went to work this morning, an old lady said that I ran a yellow light, stopped me and lectured me for a long time. My spirit sword ran out of electricity. I was almost late for work. A female teacher at the side was instantly shocked. Teacher Lin's spirit sword is electric? Yeah, I've been grading homework until midnight every day recently, and I really don't have the energy. This new electric spirit sword from Chanel is pretty good, and it's saved me a lot of spirit energy. I can face work with plenty of energy every day. The female teacher twirled her hair proudly, then held out her hand. The most important thing is that it takes 5 minutes to charge, and 2 hours to fly on it. I'll strongly recommend it to all of you. Really? That's awesome. Where did you buy it? They sell Tian Miao and Jingxi. Are they very expensive? Tian Miao flower. Jingxi promissory note. These things are very useful. Director Xia's face instantly darkened. This bunch of guys. How could they be so undisciplined in a meeting in front of outsiders? What kind of propriety was this? She stole a glance at Old Antique next to her, who looked like he was used to big storms. Director Xia Huichuan's mouth couldn't help twitching. Fortunately, this teacher from another school didn't say anything. Otherwise, she would have lost a lot of face. Suppressing her anger, Director Xia reminded everyone in a low voice. Teachers, please pay attention. Don't go astray. This is a direct order from the General Administration of 100 schools. I hope everyone will take it seriously. The director still had some authority. Hearing Director Xia's words, the noisy female teachers instantly quieted down. At the same time, they looked gratefully at Old Antique. It was only when teachers from another school were present that Director Xia would speak so calmly. Normally, Director Xia wouldn't have been able to suppress the power in her body, and would have used her pressure to intimidate everyone. Before Wang Ling had set foot in No. 59 High School. The most easily broken thing at number 59 High School was the table in the teacher's conference room. Every time Director Xia lost control of her pressure in a meeting, the legs of the table would definitely break. The rectangular table in front of Old Antique had just arrived 2 days ago. Seeing that the scene had quietened down, Director Xia secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Thinking of the chaotic student exchange meeting that Tang Jingze had hosted yesterday, Director Xia felt a lingering fear in her heart. After all, not everyone had the same magnetic field as Lotus Sunday. Furthermore, Old Antique wouldn't be able to imitate the National School Bell's electromagnetic gun. But Wang Ling had always felt that as a fatty, Old Antique had his own unique charisma. Before Old Antique had come to number 59 High School, Director Xia had done a thorough investigation on this fatty, who had taught at number 60 High School for more than 10 years, and had always been the most highly regarded teacher. Apart from being gentle in front of others and behind others from beginning to end, she had never understood what on earth it was about Old Antique that attracted the students. The main reason was still Old Antique's dexterity in switching between the two images and using them. In front of the students, Old Antique usually preferred to maintain an amiable and amusing image when he was in gossip mode. But that didn't mean that Old Antique wasn't a reserved person. For example, in the regular teachers' meeting now, Old Antique had turned on the second artistic mode. What was an artistic youth? It was saying inexplicable things and doing inexplicable things. He was indifferent when dealing with people, and his reasoning was short and concise. At first, it didn't sound like much, but after thinking about it carefully, it made a lot of sense. To be honest, Wang Ling actually preferred Old Antique's second image, because he could always learn a lot from it. But it wasn't easy to see Old Antique in this completely different style. So from the moment Old Antique had left the school dormitory early in the morning, Wang Ling had been secretly observing him with his heavenly eye. It was very clear that after Director Xia straightened out the discipline, the entire focus of the meeting was on Old Antique, this teacher from another school. It was very quiet in the hall, and no one dared to speak. The morning breeze blew slowly through the window, brushing past Old Antique's watermelon head and blowing his neat bangs. Director Xia's gaze was blank for a moment, and she inexplicably felt that in some sense, this fatty was actually pretty handsome. Old Antique looked steadily forward as he stared at the bright and clean table, which happened to reflect Director Xia's image. This scene unsettled Director Xia once again. Why is he staring at my reflection? Don't tell me, he's interested in me? Does he like me? Otherwise, why is he staring at me? Old Antique stared blankly at the table, but Wang Ling didn't have the energy to ridicule him. This was clearly out of respect. Who would stare at someone else's face during a meeting? How rude was that? Facing Director Xia Huichuan, Wang Ling now had very complicated feelings, because it was very obvious that this was another old girl in love who was trying to figure things out herself. Wait a minute. Why did he say another? Old Antique had always been the type to take a good look at him. And the more he looked at him, the more he liked him. This was what Wang Ling meant by personal charisma and inner qualities. Inner qualities, understand? How could an average person understand the inner qualities of an artistic youth? Old Antique's inner qualities weren't something that Lotus Sun could imitate. Their strategies were different. Lotus Sun's was a passerby's, while Old Antique's was an auntie's. And so 5 minutes passed. Director Xia still didn't ask any questions. and just felt her face grow hotter as she looked at Old Antique. Like her name, she really was like a young girl in love. Old Antique had been staring at the table for a very long time, and Director Xie's face was full of shame. This was the first time a man had stared at her for so long. Just like that, everyone followed Director Xie and quietly looked at Old Antique. Some of the female teachers had very sharp eyes, and for some reason, they felt that Director Xie's face was a little red. 10 minutes passed. There was still no sound, and the whole conference room was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. And then 20 minutes passed. Wang Ling. Old Antique's hair still fluttered hysterically in the cool breeze. His gaze was gentle as water as he looked at Director Xie. Director Xie, do you want to ask me a question? Director Xie was suddenly stupefied by this magnetic voice. It was only at that moment that she realized she actually hadn't asked Old Antique a question yet. Director Xie's face instantly turned red, and she put on the bashful expression of an old girl. "Ah, Teacher Wang, I'm so sorry." All the teachers were stunned. What had they seen? What had they heard? And what the hell was this? That sounded a little like she was panting a little. An old virgin who was approaching middle age, who had been in the workplace for many years, and who didn't panic when faced with trouble, had actually apologized. Actually blushed. Furthermore, she had actually shown an infatuated expression toward a fatty who taught history. What the F***K? Was this love at first sight? F***K. This plot development was a little incomprehensible. Wang Ling was already stupefied. It could only be said that Old Antique was Old Antique in the end. He hadn't even made a bloody hole in the wall, and had actually conquered number 59 high school's toughest old bone. Old Antique nodded calmly, still maintaining the indifference of an artsy young man. Now Old Antique felt that the time was ripe. At that moment, although the situation was a little awkward, it was time for the artsy young man to save the day. Turning his head slightly, Old Antique swept a glance out the window out of the corner of his eye. In the cool breeze, Old Antique's next words shook everyone's hearts. "The wind today is very, very dazzling." In the conference room, all the teachers couldn't help getting goosebumps. Chapter 39. Old Antique's identity had always been a mystery. After Old Antique had revealed his true strength in front of Lotus Sun that day, she had actually sent people to secretly investigate his background. But the strange thing was that they hadn't found anything. If even someone with Lotus Sun's background couldn't find anything, it would be even more difficult for anyone else to find out Old Antique's true identity. Of course, if he wanted to investigate, Wang Ling could investigate in many ways. One of the 3,000 great spells, the Great Recall spell, contained many abilities. It included memory replacement, memory deletion, and memory retrieval. When Wang Ling had searched Old Antique's memories before, he had found that one of them had been sealed away by Old Antique. If Wang Ling forcibly searched it, he would inflict mental damage on Old Antique. So in the end, although Wang Ling was very curious, he gave up. Of course, there were other ways to get to the bottom of this. For example, Headmaster Chen and Director Shi. As school leaders at number 60 high school, they might know everything about Old Antique's background. But since Old Antique had chosen to conceal his identity, Wang Ling felt that there was no need to get to the bottom of it. Old Antique's identity was certainly mysterious to Wang Ling. But apart from this identity, Old Antique was, in the end, just a glutton who loved to gossip, and was sometimes funny and sometimes artistic. This was also the image of an immortal master that Old Antique had worked hard to portray in front of his students after teaching for so many years. It had to be said that Old Antique had hidden himself very well. After the short teachers' meeting in the morning, Wang Ling's understanding of Old Antique had deepened considerably. It turned out that in artistic mode, Old Antique had a passive ability to win over old ants. Wang Ling even felt that Old Antique should write a book called Artistic Youth and Literary Girls. As long as Old Antique wrote down all the golden lines that he had been hiding in his artistic mode all these years, Wang Ling felt that he could win over all the middle-aged female warriors in the world. When it came to love, it had always been like a tortoise looking at a mung bean. As long as they met, it was fine. But the love between an artistic youth and a literary girl. Wang Ling said that he didn't understand it at all. Self-strategizing type women are really scary, whether they were young girls or old aunts. This was what Wang Ling thought. He didn't care whether director Xia and Old Antiques Spring had started or not, but the spring radio gymnastics was about to begin. Early spring in Shanghai City was still a little chilly. It was very close to the frozen sea, and every year at this time of the year, it would enter spring a beat later than other cities, and enter winter a beat earlier. Some experts believed that the cold air of the frozen sea would destabilize the foundations of foundation establishment cultivators. In the end, for the sake of the students' foundation, the major colleges and universities suspended the radio calisthenics not long after school started. And Wang Ling naturally avoided this problem for the time being. But unfortunately, Shanghai City had suddenly warmed up today. After 2 classes with the students of number 59 high school, not long after Old Antiques' regular teachers meeting in the morning, the school broadcast rang out punctually at 9:30. The students lined up and walked to the field under the leadership of the short students. The 5 people from number 60 high school lined up in a line at the end of the sports field. Wang Ling still chose to stand at the very back. It had been thousands of years since the founding of Huaxiu Nation, and its name had become increasingly fantastical and down-to-earth. From the first set of radio calisthenics, the rising sun, to descendants of the sun. From the eagle takes off, to Kunpeng spreads its wings. From the vitality of youth, to the passion of building a foundation. From dancing of youth, to Wushu universe. It could be said that the name of radio calisthenics had gradually evolved from mass square style to fantasy cultivation style. Not only did it praise the flowers of the motherland, it also greatly praised the boundless vitality of the younger generation of cultivators. Some people believed that the names of radio calisthenics symbolized the development and progress of the times. For example, the 250th set of radio calisthenics, Perfect World. Just from the name alone, one could see Huaxiu Nation's boundless hope for a better future. Wang Ling had in fact deliberately broken number 59 high school's school broadcast speaker before, but he had never expected number 59 high school to actually have a F***King human band. Several teachers from number 59 high school's music department spontaneously picked up their instruments and hit gongs and drums. It was a magnificent sight in front of them. Truly, man proposes, God disposes. Wang Ling sucked in a cold breath at this scene. As the magical rhythm of the music rang out, the first music for the 250th set of radio calisthenics finished playing. The PE teacher stood on the rostrum and used the lion's roar spell to amplify the rhythm of the human band's music, shouting out the beat as he danced. Everyone follow my rhythm. The 250th set of radio calisthenics Perfect World preparatory section. Step on the spot, go. 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 2 2 3 4 again. Although the name of the radio calisthenics had changed many times, the overall process hadn't changed much. Once the preparatory section was over, it was followed by stretching exercises and chest expansions. Wang Ling could just about accept these exercises to stretch his muscles and bones. Although the range of the movements was a little big, they basically didn't require much strength. But when it came to the kicking and jumping exercises, he really couldn't stay calm. Moreover, the power of the Dao Talisman seal had been greatly reduced, whether it was the kicking or the jumping exercises. If Wang Ling didn't control his strength carefully, it could lead to irreversible consequences: regional earthquakes, tectonic shifts, landslides, tsunamis, mudslides. All of these could happen. Therefore, in order to prevent the above situations from happening, Wang Ling's radio calisthenics had always been soft. He looked weak and boneless, and didn't dare use too much strength at all. In the words of a PE teacher, he was spineless and effeminate. For this reason, when he was at number 60 high school, the teachers in the sports department used him more than once as a negative example. During the sports team's regular teachers' meeting, he had spared no effort in singling out Wang Ling and severely criticized him. Of course, it wasn't that Wang Ling couldn't understand how the teachers felt. This was especially true for the teachers of the physical education department. Of course, They hoped to see the energetic students strutting on the field with their heads held high and their chests puffed out. But he felt that if he got serious and something went wrong, who would be able to bear the responsibility? In the face of the supercilious looks from the teachers around him, he withstood the pressure and finished the entire set of radio calisthenics. Very good. Everything was calm and peaceful. There were no accidents and no casualties. Nowadays, even doing radio calisthenics made one's skin crawl. Wang Ling thought that there was no one else like this. As a child, Wang Ling's strength had been very small and had still been manageable. But as he gradually grew up, his realm and all his attributes increased uncontrollably, and Wang Ling felt that life was becoming more and more difficult. He was on tenterhooks, even when doing radio calisthenics. Now that things had come to this, Wang Ling felt that he really had to change the situation. For example, on the night of the next full moon, he could use the Great Moon Reading spell to brainwash the entire population. He could completely revamp the radio calisthenics system, change it to something that he could accept. Taiji Fist might be a good choice. Chapter 40. After the morning radio calisthenics, around noon, Old Antique found Wang Ling for a heart-to-heart talk in a small corner. There was nothing else. It was still about the broadcast gymnastics. Actually, Wang Ling understood very well. After all, they were representing the school this time, especially since they were outside the school. He also needed to pay attention to his image and temperament. Most teachers believed that no matter how good a student was at using a spirit sword, or how proficient they were at drawing talismans, the ordinary broadcast gymnastics was the event that could best reflect the spirit of the students. This was also the reason why, even in the scientific cultivation era, major cultivation colleges and universities still hadn't banned radio gymnastics. Fortunately, Old Antique was a gentle person. Being approachable had always been one of Old Antique's characteristics. In addition, he seemed to have found his spring after the regular classroom meeting this morning, and was in a particularly good mood. After saying a few simple words to Wang Ling to pay attention to his image as a student of number 60 high school, she patted her butt and skipped away briskly. Quietly, Old Antique left, just as quietly as he had come. Looking at Old Antique's current state, Wang Ling instantly thought of this poem in his heart. An amusing artistic youth who had fallen in love. Sure enough, people in love all have problems with their brains. For the first time, Wang Ling felt that this bouncing Old Antique was a little abnormal. After this private conversation with Old Antique this time, Wang Ling also made a simple assumption. If it hadn't been Old Antique who had pulled him into this little corner this time, but Teacher Pan, who had an even more violent temper. Given Teacher Pan's personality, Wang Ling felt that she might not be able to resist making a move on him. At this thought, Wang Ling couldn't help shuddering. The grass on the grave of the last person to forcibly make a move on him, big young Master Suing, was probably more than 3 meters high. In any case, out of his responsibility to Teacher Pan, and even more so to the people around him, Wang Ling was even more certain of the necessity of brainwashing the entire nation on the night of the full moon. In the afternoon, Old Antique sent a WeChat message to gather everyone in number 59 high school's gymnasium. There were only 2 days left before the all-important Spirit Sword Exchange meet. As the lead teacher, Old Antique felt that it was necessary to have a proper training session. Number 59 high school's gymnasium was very big. For most foundation establishment high schools nowadays, the interior space of such a large venue was a completely different world. It didn't look very big from the outside, but the space inside had been expanded by a space expansion spell. In fact, spatial expansion was very common. Take for example the storage pocket on the school uniform, or Old Antique's snack drawer, which was the size of a supermarket's inventory. He was now very familiar with this technique of simply increasing space. It was completely used in daily life, and the biggest benefit was that it greatly reduced the price of real estate. Those real estate speculators who were hated by the people could no longer stir up trouble. Strange. Why isn't Mr. Wang here yet? They had already been waiting for a while in the separate training area, In number 59 high school's gymnasium, Lin Xiaoyu asked doubtfully. Everyone had the impression that old Antique was a punctual man. Let's wait a little longer. Lotus Sun also frowned slightly, feeling very strange at the same time. Generally speaking, as long as old Antique had agreed on a time, he would either arrive early or on the dot. He would never be so easily late. He wouldn't have encountered any trouble, would he? Feather Lin asked again. Lotus Sun was silent for a moment. She had personally witnessed old Antique's strength. Furthermore, old Antique's identity was a mystery. Even Huaguo Water Curtain Group couldn't find out his background. For such a man, it would be good if he didn't find trouble with others. Wang Ling was also silent for a moment. After carefully considering Feather Lin's words, he felt that there was actually nothing wrong with what this Fujoshi said. Because old Antique had indeed encountered trouble. If having his luck in love could be considered trouble. While everyone was talking about old Antique, speak of the devil, and he's here, outside the stadium. A broad figure was reflected on the ground. Dazzling sunlight slanted in from outside the door, elongating this already broad figure, and making it several body lengths taller. Although they couldn't see the face clearly, everyone knew who it was just from the area of the shadow on the ground. In the next moment, the shadow on the ground suddenly leaped up like a ghost, causing everyone to be dumbfounded. Then, in the midst of silence and astonishment, a huge fatty bounced up to them. Super Chun Hirogwa, Lotus Sun and Feather Lin were all stupefied. Now, it wasn't just Wang Ling. Even the others could see that old Antique wasn't normal today. Old Antique's chubby little face was rosy, like a peach blossom in full bloom, and he looked radiant. It was as if everyone could see the sunshine seeping through the cracks of old Antique's mouth as he grinned. It was really 2F*** King Radiant. Did he win the lottery? Or did he advance to the godlike pentakill? The corners of Super Chen's mouth twitched as an incomprehensible expression appeared on his face. He felt that he was a relatively insensitive person, but if he could tell at one glance that there was something wrong with old Antique, then it wasn't just a simple problem. There really was a big problem. Of course, Wang Ling was probably the only one among the no. 60 high students present who knew why old Antique was so happy. Unfortunately, Wang Ling didn't like gossip, so he kept his mouth shut about old Antique. Master of Dopey couldn't hold it in. As number 60 high school's widely known gossipmonger and omniscient fortune-teller, this was the first time Hirogwa felt a sense of crisis, as if his own reputation was about to be destroyed. It seems that you don't know everything. Super Chin deliberately put on a teasing expression. Are you challenging me? Hirogwa raised his eyebrows. There was actually something he didn't know. It didn't exist. He raised his arm, and Dopey very consciously jumped down from Hirogwa's shoulder, then turned its head to peck at its pure white feathers. A normal parrot would imitate what it said from time to time, but Dopey was an intelligent parrot. According to Master of Dopey Hirogwa's own account, Dopey would only speak when he allowed it to, otherwise it wouldn't even dare fart. Everyone clearly didn't doubt his words at all, and Hirogwa was thus given the title of Master of Dopey. In everyone's eyes, this was probably the most outstanding pet that Master of Dopey had ever trained in the soul pet industry. Even you don't know about old Antique, do you expect Dopey to tell you? Super Chin couldn't help laughing. Dopey, show this bastard what you've got. Don't lose face for our soul servant shop. Hirogwa pointed at Dopey and spat out saliva in excitement. The soul servant shop he mentioned was actually the name of his family's ancestral soul pet shop. Actually, from the moment he entered school, Wang Ling had realized that Dopey wasn't simple. Wang Ling had secretly given it another nickname, Ice Sculpture. Because it didn't like to talk, it didn't have many lines of dialogue until now, and maintained an emotionless and detached attitude all day long. Even when Wang Ling usually activated the mind-reading ability, he couldn't hear any of Dopey's thoughts, which was enough to show how aloof this parrot was. Until now, when Hirogwa's saliva sprayed on the pure white feathers that Dopey was so proud of, Dopey finally couldn't take it anymore. It rolled its eyes at Hirogwa in disgust, and then Wang Ling heard Dopey curse loudly in its heart. King retard. Don't you know I'm a neat freak? Hearing Dopey's thoughts for the first time, Wang Ling's heart was shaken. He never thought that Dopey's habit of not talking would actually break down in this situation, due to its own neat freak. It looked like this wasn't just a cold parrot, but also a parrot with a temper. Furthermore, Wang Ling could sense Dopey's undisguised and unpretentious arrogance. Perhaps this parrot's owner, the parrot expert master of Dopey Hirogwa in everyone's impression. Chapter 41. The Great Blood Origin Spell was one of the 3,000 great spells that Wang Ling had mastered. Its proficiency level was medium. One of the branch abilities was called Blood Origin Tracing, which could accurately trace the origin of one's bloodline. To put it bluntly, it was a DNA test. In the spirit energy era, many people had in fact relied mostly on bloodline inheritance to pass down their legacies. The Great Blood Origin spell had been all the rage at that time, and cultivators had fearlessly ventured deep into the ancient tombs of older cultivators in search of their legacies, hoping to obtain a huge boost in realm strength in a short period of time. But now the state had already strictly prohibited this kind of legacies inheritance. This was because the risk of inheritance was very high, and there was also the possibility of contracting a blood disease. Back then, Huaxiao Nation's first-generation leaders had specially gathered these cultivators who had recklessly inherited their legacies together and held a condemnation meeting. The crime was called anti-chainism and opportunism. The leaders of the older generation had always felt that no matter how talented one was, one had to rely on oneself to accumulate cultivation step by step. Relying on crooked methods to cultivate definitely wasn't the right way. So after that, the Great Blood Origin spell had declined, and was strictly banned by the state as a forbidden spell. Apart from Wang Ling, who had learned it in his mother's womb, there were only a handful of people in the world who still knew this spell. Now, Wang Ling would occasionally use this spell to check on the talent of the people around him. Bloodlines were also a manifestation of talent. When he was a child, Wang Ling had always felt that there were people around him who were born with a golden spoon in their mouths. Unfortunately, to this day, Wang Ling hadn't found anyone of his kind. He had discovered the results of Dopey's blood origin tracing test when he entered school. Dopey wasn't an ordinary parrot, even though it had hidden itself very well. Wang Ling had still discovered it. To be exact, it was a hybrid parrot of many noble bloodlines. Through the blood origin tracing, Wang Ling had seen the following species in Dopey's bloodline. Kuan Peng Ghost Car Chong Ming Vermilion Bird by Fong. Oh, that was right, there was also a Bobo. Who knew what Dopey's parents had experienced before it was born? Of course, Wang Ling didn't want to know. But the one thing he was sure of was that after mixing so many bloodlines, Dopey had also obtained a unique special ability. Normally, Hirogwa wouldn't show off Dopey's ability in public. Otherwise he would inevitably be suspected of performing acrobatics. But now that he had been questioned by Super Chun, Hirogwa felt that he needed to show his hand. He winked at two balls. The man and the bird had actually made an agreement a long time ago. Internally, there was a clear distinction between public and private affairs. Under the watchful eyes of the public, he still had to give face to the host. When he got home, as a shit-shoveling officer, Hirogwa had no choice but to let go of this master of Dopey robe and pay the price of his public glory. Others might not know about this déjà vu between man and bird, but Wang Ling had already seen through it. It was just that he didn't want to say too much. It was worth mentioning that Dopey was female. Sorry to keep you waiting. Old Antique skipped cheerfully over to them. Before he could say a few words, his wristwatch rang again. He looked at the caller ID and immediately waved to everyone with a red face. I'm sorry, everyone wait for me. After that, he ran to the side to answer the phone. Such a lively Old Antique was beyond everyone's understanding. While Old Antique was on the phone, Wang Ling could figure out what on earth had happened to him. There's nothing in this world that I don't know. As he spoke, Hirogwa carefully plucked a feather from Dopey's body. The moment it was plucked, Dopey's white and slightly plump body visibly shuddered. What are you trying to do? Featherlin asked, puzzled. This is a writing testing technique, and needs 2 eggs feather as support. As long as this master pinched the bird feather, stared at the fortune teller, and said the fortune teller's name 3 times. We'll know the result based on the color of the feathers, Hirogwa said mysteriously. Dopey silently rolled his eyes at Hirogwa. First you spit on my feather, and now you want me to cooperate with you in showing off. Hee, when we get back you'll suffer. In fact, how was this a writing test technique? Hirogwa made it sound like it was a marvelous technique. In general terms, it was fortune-telling. The main point was that this ability wasn't Hirogwa's, but Dopey's own special ability. In Wang Ling's opinion, this ability, which was a combination of the bloodlines of several divine birds, was a little useless. But overall, the result of the calculation should be accurate. At the very least, it was much better than the charlatans who caught people on the side of the road and said, "Benefactor, there's evil in between your eyebrows. You're bound to suffer a bloody calamity." Pinching the feather, Hirogwa silently said Old Antique's real name 3 times. Very quickly, everyone saw the originally white and flawless feather instantly turn pink. Pink feather? Hirogwa stared at the feather, with an astonished expression. Lotus Sun gave the pink feather a cursory look and asked, "Pink feather, what does it symbolize?" Hirogwa had long since memorized the symbolic meaning of the color of a feather. But to be honest, he hadn't expected a feather of this color to appear on Old Antique. Thinking of Old Antique's jumping and cheering attitude earlier, as well as this crucial pink feather, the answer seemed to have already surfaced. The answer seemed to have floated out of the water. Pink feathers symbolize luck in love affairs. Old Antique, he's in love. Everyone was enlightened at first. Oh, so he's in love. After a moment of dead silence, there was an earth-shattering roar. What the hell? Dating? Love. Love. This 10,000-year-old Old Antique, who only knew how to eat spicy strips, had actually started to arrange flowers in his antique vase. Super Chun, Lotus Sun and Featherlin all felt that this was inconceivable. Is your feather reliable? Super Chun questioned again. F***K. You still don't believe me? I just think it's a little too fantastical. It doesn't make sense to think about fortune-telling with bird feathers, said Super Chun. Wang Ling. So, do you think it's very scientific that bird feathers can change color? Super Chun was someone who didn't believe in superstitions, and was very fond of getting into a dead end, especially when it came to feudal superstitions. To verify the authenticity of the feather's fortune-telling, Super Chun unceremoniously pulled another feather from Dopey's body. This time, Dopey's balls twitched violently in pain. Gnashing its teeth, it looked at Hirogwa. Although it didn't have any teeth to gnash its teeth with, Dopey didn't care who had pulled the feather. In any case, it would be Hirogwa's fault in the end. Hirogwa. What do you want? Come on, our comrade Dopey Master. Find someone else to calculate it. Super Chun handed the feather to Hirogwa. Hirogwa silently pursed his lips, then looked at Feather Lin. After silently saying her name 3 times, the feather turned dark red. After all, it was her own fortune and misfortune that was being calculated. So Feather Lin was a little nervous. What does this color represent? Hirogwa carefully identified the color of the feather, and quickly read the message. This red feather symbolizes drawing fire to your body. You have to worry about fire in the near future. Stay away from places with fires for the time being. Feather Lin had an incredulous look on her face. This is too accurate. Just last week, the gay doujinshi that she had painstakingly collected for many years was discovered by her father and burned to ashes. Super Chun didn't believe it, and plucked another feather from Dopey's body. Come on, calculate mine. This feather was on Dopey's belly, where the flesh was the most tender, and it hurt so much that all its feathers stood on end. Wang Ling even saw a crystalline tear in the corner of Dopey's eye. Helplessly helping Super Chun calculate it again, Hirogwa found that the feather had turned azure blue. He sighed and said, "You have to stay away from water for the next month." Super Chun also had an incredulous look on his face. As expected, it's very accurate. Last week, Super Chun remembered that he had been swimming in the swimming pool when his foot had cramped. If it hadn't been for the lifeguard, who had intervened in time, and split open the water with a palm, Super Chun felt that it would have been game over for him. Do you believe me now? Hirogwa felt quite helpless. At that moment, Old Antique came back from a long phone conversation, looking even more radiant than before. Students, I have some news for you. Standing in front of everyone, Old Antique didn't hide his wild joy at all. I found you a teacher's wife. Everyone. Wang Ling. So, what was the point of plucking the feather earlier? Chapter 42. Wang Ling hadn't expected Old Antique to announce the news so soon. There were a lot of flash marriages these days, but he hadn't expected there to be so many flash relationships as well. Wang Ling felt that Old Antique might have been unable to extricate himself from the river of love because he had been lacking love for too long. It was obvious that spring had arrived for Old Antique. On the other side, Hirogwa had also entered the cold winter season. Dopey wasn't an ordinary parrot. This wasn't only reflected in its special abilities after mixing various bloodlines, but also in its ability to transform. Dopey could transform, even though it could only maintain its human form for a limited time. But it was enough to train Hirogwa, especially when Dopey saw that a small part of its pristine white feathers, which it was so proud of, had actually been plucked off because of this damn fortune-telling. Wang Ling could feel the low pressure coming from Hirogwa's shoulder even from afar. Furthermore, he could hear Dopey's thoughts again. Whip handcuffs, small candle hiss. Although it was just 3 short nouns, it was already enough for Wang Ling's imagination to run wild. Wang Ling had never thought that playing with a bird could be so exciting nowadays. When in love, Old Antique was even more amiable than usual. This should have been a stress-free spirit sword training session. But Hirogwa's expression was deeply immersed in Dopey's cold pressure the entire time, and he couldn't lift his spirits no matter what. The lesson of this story was that there was a price to pay for posturing. If you wanted to show off in front of others, a bird would drop wax on you behind your back. Wang Ling felt that through this incident, Father and Mother Wang had once again instilled in him a good example of how to be a low-key person. As always, Wang Ling felt that the spirit sword training session this time was very boring. What Old Antique taught was a very basic beginner spirit sword course. In theory, a foundation establishment cultivator could fly a sword. But according to the current education system, Huaxiao Nation's General Administration of Education had moved flying a sword to universities. In high school, the vast majority of foundation establishment high school students would be exposed to basic maintenance of spirit swords and basic flying swords. Of course, as students of the elite class, they might also be exposed to more in-depth content, such as advanced sword techniques and swordsmanship manuals and so on. But for Wang Ling, these lessons still weren't challenging at all. As the saying goes, a true expert doesn't have a sword in his hand, but a sword in his heart. Even a blade of grass can cut through the stars, the sun, and the moon. This kind of highest level of swordsmanship had already been recorded in the annals of history, and most people thought that it was just a legend. But Wang Ling felt that if the Dao Talisman seal was completely undone, it wouldn't be difficult for him to cut a star with a blade of grass. The basic sword manipulation training was mainly to control one's spirit sword to draw the figure 8 in the air. Wang Ling carefully controlled his small wooden sword and restrained his strength as he did his best to hold back, for fear that he would accidentally blow off the roof of the stadium. In the end, thanks to Old Antique's strict grading, Wang Ling's proficiency in the sword control technique was rated 4th out of everyone. Although he was ranked 4th out of the 5, he was still very satisfied with this ranking. The person ranked last was Feather Lin. The mother-child sword was not easy to control in the first place. The mental cultivation method and the imperial sword technique were twice as difficult as holding the sword with one hand. What was more, Feather Lin had misunderstood the gender of her 2 spirit swords over the years. So although they had gone through a long period of getting used to each other, the fact was that the development of their rapport had always been delayed. We can't go on like this. Old Antique put his hands on his hips and sighed, feeling a headache coming on. Although Old Antique, who was madly in love, was a little unusual, he didn't idle around to collect data from the previous spirit sword exchange meet between number 59 High School and number 58 High School. On paper, Students from the three schools actually had about the same level of control over their spirit swords. In fact, number 60 high school had an advantage because Lotus Sun's mysterious sea had already given birth to a sword spirit. To use an old saying from Chinibyu, high school students who had given birth to a sword spirit were as rare as phoenix feathers and Chilean horns in all 100 schools, and were terrifying existences. However, the Spirit Sword Exchange Meet was a team event and used a team grading system. If number 60 high school wanted to win in this exchange meet, apart from Lotus Sun and Super Chun, who were currently performing the best, the other three had to at least ensure that their final grades were at or above the average. If one of them held them back, the result would be disastrous. It was worth mentioning that although Wang Ling was ranked 4th, his grades were stuck at the city average. Old Antique felt that this was very miraculous. In some sense, Old Antique felt that someone who scored 60 was more capable than someone who scored 100. But at the moment, it looked like Feather Lin was the only one holding them back, and the grades didn't look good. The city average score for the Imperial Sword technique was 65, and Feather Lin hadn't even reached the passing mark. But Old Antique was Old Antique. Since Headmaster Chun had sent Old Antique to lead the team, even if this fatty who only knew how to eat snacks was currently having a bad time, his teaching ability was unquestionable. After that, except for Feather Lin, everyone else left the gym. There were still 2 hours before dinner. These 2 hours were supposed to be free time, but Feather Lin would have to work overtime to train. Teacher, am I hopeless? This Fujoshi was obviously very vexed as she lowered her head deeply. Feather Lin felt that flying a sword had become the second most painful experience in her life, after those gay doujinshi had been burned. Girls were thin-skinned, and Old Antique had to leave them some face. If it had been Teacher Pan's teaching style, she would have long since broken out in a torrent of abuse, and used all kinds of radical goading methods to stimulate the students' adrenaline. But every teacher had their own teaching style. This kind of reprimanding and goading method didn't suit Old Antique's gentle style at all. Moreover, this was Old Antique who was madly in love. It was even more impossible for him to reprimand a female student who had been thwarted on the road to learning. Compared with Teacher Pan's goading method, Old Antique was better at encouraging education. Furthermore, he was very good at prescribing the right medicine. Flying a pair of mother and child swords was indeed a lot more troublesome than using a one-handed sword. But the principle was the same. The students just had to memorize a few more formulas. For students in the elite class, memorizing books had never been difficult, not to mention that Feather Lin herself was a top student. Hence, Old Antique felt that it wasn't that Feather Lin couldn't learn, but that she couldn't get into it. Furthermore, Old Antique could see that Feather Lin was in a very low mood. In fact, the pile of collectible gay doujinshi that had been burned a while ago was the main culprit behind Feather Lin's mood. But Old Antique didn't know anything about this at all, and could only judge based on his many years of experience and observation. After all, investigating a student's privacy in private was quite perverted behavior. In a situation like this, Old Antique had a lot of ways to deal with this kind of difficult and complicated problem. In any case, he just had to give her what she liked. Spirit light flashed in Old Antique's hand, and a book appeared. He handed Feather Lin a book that he had prepared beforehand. I hope student Lin will take a good look at this book. The main character's name is very similar to that of your mother and child swords. Feather Lin took the book curiously, and saw the 4 words Founder of Devil Path elegantly written on the cover. Actually, before this group training, Old Antique had already thoughtfully prepared gifts for everyone in accordance with his motivational method as an emergency incentive. For Lotus Sun, he had compiled a list of Wang Ling's favorite snacks. For Super Chun, he had prepared a dumbbell with a gravity system, so that he could control its weight at will. For Hirogwa, he had prepared a small notebook that recorded student gossip that only Old Antique knew. Chapter 43. As the wind rustled on campus, there was a storm everywhere. Senior with a total score of 8,823 in 3 years. Senior delinquent, Senior Buffing, Senior Fengyan. At some point in time, He Buffing's titles and legends had started to circulate in the school. Even He Buffing himself didn't know when on earth he had been called a delinquent. Perhaps it had been 3 years ago, after his passionate first love in high school had ended? He Buffing couldn't remember it at all, and didn't care. Since he was already regarded as a school bully and delinquent, He Buffing felt that sometimes breaking a jar was also a way of freeing himself. Ever since he became a delinquent, He Buffing discovered that he could enter any restroom in the school as he pleased. Only after he was done peeing would the other students dare to use the restroom with trepidation. The cafeteria auntie always scooped the most meat for his meals. Everyone in the school was afraid of him. Even the teachers. Even Director Xia, who always had a straight face, retreated far away when she saw him. To be honest, He Buffing had hated this kind of life where everyone avoided him like a snake or scorpion. But gradually, He Buffing began to learn how to enjoy it. What He Buffing hadn't expected was that Tang Jingze would come looking for him this morning. This man, who had previously caused the teachers and students from number 58 high school to lose their wits, had actually humbly come looking for him, and begged him to teach those excessive guys a lesson. These 4 people? In the men's washroom, He Buffing threw away the cigarette, but in his hand, and stomped it hard under his foot. At the same time, he stared at the photos and relevant information that Tang Jingze had given him. That's them. Tang Jingze replied weakly. Feng Huaqing and Liang Wei shrank behind Tang Jingze, not even daring to breathe loudly. This delinquent senior was indeed as scary as the rumors said. I remember that there were 5 student representatives from number 60 high school this time. You crossed out that Lotus Sun? What are you looking down on me? You think I can't handle her? He Buffing looked at the information in his hand and smiled. It was a simple question, but Tang Jingze shuddered. Don't be afraid. He Buffing patted Tang Jingze on the shoulder. After all, she's the young miss of Huaguo Water Curtain Group. Not just anyone can provoke her. What senior said makes sense. However, my time is limited. I can only help you teach one person a lesson at most. He Buffing pointed at the photo. First of all, I don't have the habit of bullying women. This Feather Lin can go first. And senior sure has a good demeanor. Liang Wei flattered. Then He Buffing pointed at Super Chin. Secondly, this muscular brother looks very hard to deal with. I didn't want to have a philosophical wrestling match with him, while I was teaching him a lesson. According to the information, this person's family seems to have some background. I think we should dispense with it. Then, He Buffing pointed at Master of Dopey in the photo. And this one, he looks very silly. But his family runs a spirit pet shop, and I feel that the parrot in his hand is not easy to deal with. Finally, He Buffing turned his gaze to Wang Ling from the data. This guy seems to be the easiest to bully, right? That's him. Senior, are you sure you don't want to reconsider? After leaving the gym, it was up to Wang Ling to allocate the rest of his free time. Old Antique had made Feather Lin stay in the gym to read Founder of Devil Path. Lotus Sun had taken advantage of the fact that the students at number 59 high school were still in class to run to the school rooftop and try to summon the sword spirit to improve their rapport. Super Chun and Hirogua, these 2 unmotivated fellows, had scampered back to the school dormitory to play games as soon as they came out of the training camp. Wang Ling didn't need to train, and he didn't play games often, because any equipment in his hands could easily be scrapped. Of course, the wristwatch which Wang Ming had specially developed for him actually contained games. Furthermore, the game library was updated every Monday, and included almost all the latest games on the market. But Wang Ling had never played a single game before, because the various numerical values generated during the game could indirectly reflect his reaction, agility and so on. Wang Ling didn't want that data freak to get hold of any clues about him. Wang Ling had always felt that he was actually a very boring person, and that he had always been a loner since he was a child. Of course, this had to do with father and mother Wang's education. There were many times when Wang Ling thought that if he didn't have this realm and strength, he would just be the most ordinary person in the end. The heavens gave everyone a chance, and also gave everyone equality. The price he had to pay for this unparalleled realm and strength was also very painful. Wang Ling couldn't enjoy games happily. He couldn't make friends who were especially close to him. He couldn't high-five his buddies when he was happy. And he had to tremble with fear even when he sneezed or slept. He had to control his strength at all times and do his best to guard against accidental injuries. This wasn't just a responsibility to himself, but also to others. Wang Ling's deepest childhood shadow had probably been loneliness when he was young, but as he gradually grew older, he had gradually gotten used to being alone. Life seemed to have become a lot livelier after coming to number 60 high school, especially the activities outside the school these past few days, which made Wang Ling feel very uncomfortable and unaccustomed to living in a group, which he had never experienced before. For Wang Ling, this free time was really a rare opportunity for him to have some peace and quiet on his own. How did that song go again? Take a walk with me on the streets of the school, so dirty, so dirty. Whether it was number 59 high school or number 58 high school, which was passed down by word of mouth, there was a place similar to number 60 high school's small garden. After number 59 high school had been expanded by that pretentious school director, in addition to the wide tree-lined path in front of the school gate and the new school building, a piece of land had also been expanded behind the school building. It was a cherry blossom forest full of cherry trees. It was the cherry blossom season now, and the forest was dyed pink by the cherry blossoms. Being in the middle of it gave off the feeling of first love. After school at number 59 high school, you could always see some young couples making vows of love under the cherry blossom trees. Chapter 44. Wang Ling reached out to pick up a petal, closed his eyes and breathed carefully, savoring the fragrance of the pale pink petals. The fragrance of this season was just right for Wang Ling. These were just ordinary cherry trees, compared with the various spirit fruit trees sold on the market, which were grown from spirit tree seeds. Cherry trees themselves didn't have any spirit chi, but they were still an indispensable part of the construction of the school environment. This was the kind of life he wanted to live. Wang Ling very much enjoyed this rare tranquility. Standing silently in the cherry blossom forest, he savored the pure fragrance and closed his eyes, as if he was the only person left in the entire universe. Suddenly, Wang Ling's body trembled again, and he actually shivered. Of course, it wasn't because he was cold from the wind, but because his muscles were spasming for some reason. His body didn't feel cold, and he was immune to all poisons. Any virus that entered his body would be disintegrated by powerful spirit energy molecules. Thus, Wang Ling had never been sick since he was a child, and didn't even know what a cold felt like. Of course, he would occasionally have a muscle spasm, which often happened when Wang Ling was feeling tranquil. It had nothing to do with his body, but was related to his nerves. Even though he stood at the pinnacle of human cultivators in terms of realm, not everyone could understand how lonely it was to be at the top. The immortal king wasn't an old man who prayed in a rundown temple all day long, nor was he a Taoist priest who had seen through the world of mortals. When all was said and done, Wang Ling was just a 16-year-old teenager, and he also had emotions. Although he said that he was already used to it, in his heart, he was unwilling to admit that he was in fact too lonely. Wang Ling stepped on the soft cherry blossom petals as he slowly walked forward. The cool wind brushed his cheeks, and he heard some subtle sounds in the air. Following the sounds, he looked in the direction in front of him. Not far away, several kittens were playing happily under a cherry blossom tree, jumping and pouncing on the falling petals. These were ordinary stray cats, which could be found on every campus. Sometimes, Wang Ling was quite envious of these little things. They were carefree and didn't need to worry. When they were hungry, there would always be a school poop scooper who would come forward to give them food. When they were full, they could play in groups, and when they were tired, they could continue to lie down and sleep lazily. They didn't need to worry about restraining their strength. Staring at these cute little guys, he really wanted to reach out and pick one up. But considering that the effect of the talisman seal was weakening, he finally withdrew his hand. Under the cherry blossom tree, a beautiful boy was happily playing with a few cats. This was supposed to be a beautiful scene where humans and nature coexisted in harmony. But sometimes this kind of harmony would be broken, especially when a person knew the mind-reading ability. As he looked at the kittens, he could clearly hear their thoughts. The big cat in the lead said, "Look, this person has been staring at us." Two Cat said, "He might be a pervert." Tri-Cat said, "Let's go. He seemed to be trying to grab us just now." Four Cat, "I heard that there was a pervert who specialized in catching cats to make skewers out of. It's very dangerous here." Big Cat, "It's exactly 2 o'clock. Boss Jingtan has a meeting to attend. Let's go, let's go." Wang Ling. Then, the few cats scattered in one direction. Wang Ling had experienced this kind of embarrassment many times since he was a child, especially when the talisman seal was weakened. His aura was a lot heavier than before, and animals and insects were usually much more sensitive to this kind of dangerous aura than humans. However, not all creatures were afraid of Wang Ling. Occasionally, a few reckless dragonflies and butterflies would perch on his shoulders and hair. Wang Ling continued in the direction in which the kittens had fled. Number 59 High School's cherry blossom garden had a small artificial lotus pond, which couldn't be considered very large. When Wang Ling had entered number 59 High School before, he had heard someone talk about it through his mind-reading ability. This small lotus pond had also been newly built, but there had been a small incident a while ago when a sparrow had accidentally fallen into the water and drowned. A student who liked to cause trouble had named the sparrow Xiaoyuha, and then had paid for a stone tablet to be erected on the side, and named the small lotus pond Xiaoming Lakeside. Wang Ling was a little worried that something might happen to the kittens, so he decided to follow them to take a look. These little guys were still too young. Although the water in the lotus pond didn't even reach Wang Ling's knees, it was already deep enough for them. But it turned out that Wang Ling had been overthinking things. This group of kittens clearly had their own secret base. When Wang Ling arrived at Xiaoming Lakeside, it was very quiet, and there wasn't even the shadow of a cat in sight. Wang Ling sighed and was about to leave when he suddenly heard a meow from the cherry blossom tree next to him, and then saw a black shadow fall into the lotus pond. Plop! A huge splash of water. Wang Ling was pretty close to the lotus pond. Under normal circumstances, if he didn't react in time, he would definitely be drenched. But before these splashing water droplets could get close to Wang Ling, they were all frozen in midair. Then, he moved his fingers, and like a receding tide, the water that had splashed up returned to the lotus pond without a single drop left behind. After doing all this, Wang Ling secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Because he had lost control of his spirit energy these days, he had damaged a lot of things at number 59 High School, from a spirit gathering array to a small electronic product. Actually, Wang Ling still felt very guilty. In any case, the water in the lotus pond was public property of the school, and Wang Ling felt that he had saved the day in time. This wasn't time backtracking, but the great gravitational spell, one of the 3,000 magical powers. The sucking palm, that had once become famous in the year of the Shao clan's leader's debut, had been partially based on the principle of this magical power. Of course, he could achieve the same effect by using time backtracking, but it would also consume a lot of Wang Ling's spirit energy. The most important thing was that after time backtracking, the world line would jump. So unless it was absolutely necessary, Wang Ling didn't want to use this ability lightly. Standing next to the small lotus pond, Wang Ling's eyes searched for the black shadow that had fallen into the pond just now. Although it had only happened for a split second, Wang Ling was still able to rely on his terrifying dynamic vision to determine that this thing was probably a black cat. It was obvious that this black cat had been a little startled. After all, it had deliberately jumped in from here and wanted to splash this person with water. After jumping into the water, the black cat had immediately scuttled to the side, hid by the lotus pond, and started to observe in secret. Then, it had seen the entire process of Wang Ling using the great gravitational spell. I never thought that this person would actually know such an advanced spell. He had formulated a series of plans to mess with Wang Ling, but had never thought that he would fail at the first round. What a bad start. He Buffung who had turned into a black cat, sighed in his heart. He jumped onto a lotus leaf in the lotus pond from one side. After all, it was an artificial lotus pond. Everything from the lotus flowers to the lotus leaves were fake. Moreover, the buoyancy was very strong. It was like a kickboard used for swimming training, so he Buffing could step on the lotus leaf steadily. This wasn't the first time he Buffing had turned into a cat, so he was quite agile. After all, the way he moved was different from his 2 feet to his 4 limbs. It was really hard to get used to it without some practice. And so this black cat officially entered Wang Ling's line of sight. After a brief confrontation between man and cat, he Buffing jumped off the lotus leaf. With a 360-degree Thomas full spin, he plunged into the water. Then he started to struggle with all his might. Even if Wang Ling didn't use the mind-reading ability, he knew that this guy had done it on purpose. What was more, Wang Ling now knew very clearly that this black cat was actually a human, and had been sent by Tang Jingzi to mess with him. Given the current situation, if he tried to save Wang Ling, there would definitely be some other crafty plot. If he ignored it, Wang Ling felt that the other party would definitely accuse him of not saving someone in danger. Furthermore, it would very likely affect number 60 High's reputation. After all, Old Antique had said that every person who came to number 59 high school represented number 60 high school. Of course he had to save him. However, it was necessary to give him a bit of punishment. Chapter 45. Ever since Wang Ling had personally witnessed Old Antique's art mode with his own eyes, he had also started to sort out his own passive skills. Because sometimes, especially for Wang Ling, trouble wasn't just caused by his inability to suppress his strength. Sometimes his own passive skills were the root of the problem. Thus, over the last 2 days, Wang Ling had actually quietly divided his passive skills into 3 categories: the practical series, the chicken rib series, and the useless series. It could be said that they were simple and clear at a glance. Among the useless series, Wang Ling's deepest impression was a passive branch spell from the 3000 great spells called Great Wave Palm called Carp Jump. As long as Wang Ling applauded a person 32 times in a row, that person would act like the Carp King when it used Water Splash, and jump around on the spot without any attack. Then, there was the Chicken Rib series. From the name of this series of passive skills, it was obvious that they were tasteless but a pity to discard. Some skills seemed very practical, but for Wang Ling, they were worthless. For example, Wang Ling's Infinite Devour passive branch spell from the 3000 great spells was the Great Devouring spell. As long as Wang Ling dropped his tears on food, the food would quickly split into mini portions in a short period of time. 1 became 2, 2 became 4. Unfortunately, Wang Ling wasn't a foodie. He just had a soft spot for crispy noodle snacks. Wang Ling remembered that when he had used this spell to duplicate crispy noodle snacks as a child, the number of crispy noodle snacks had increased uncontrollably. At that time, Wang Ling could only open up a tunnel and send these spell-enhanced crispy noodle snacks into the vast universe. Now, these crispy noodle snacks could probably already form a galaxy. Thus, although Wang Ling had a lot of passive skills, most of them weren't very practical. As for the practical skill series, although his skill pool was pitifully small, they were all skills that Wang Ling thought would be very useful for hiding his realm. For example, the Great Shielding spell from before. This spell's passive ability blocked the possibility of criminals investigating him through other channels. And now, in the face of this black cat movie emperor flopping around in the pool, Wang Ling's other passive skill had unknowingly been activated. His heavenly eye had the ability to separate the false from the true. To be honest, even Wang Ling hadn't expected that there would actually be someone in a foundation establishment high school who knew how to use the transformation spell. This was a fairly advanced spell. Although the general administration of 100 schools didn't forbid the study of transformation techniques, based on the complexity of transformation techniques alone, it was basically nonsense for a foundation establishment cultivator to learn them on their own without the guidance of a famous teacher. At this time, Black Cat Movie King had been flopping around in the lotus pond for a full 2 minutes. In the face of such a delicate and pitiful kitten, this person actually had no sympathy at all. This was what he Buffing thought. He had already placed that punk underling of his in the vicinity. If Wang Ling did anything but watch someone die, this underling would immediately take a photo and leave behind evidence of his inaction. The next day, it would flood the school's tieba and all the major forums. This little bit of news, as long as it was complemented with a slightly sentimental article, it would definitely cause a bunch of shit-shoveling officials to become agitated and form a joint crusade. At that time, number 60 high school would definitely lose all face. But the premise of the entire plan was that the transformation technique must be flawless. The black cat was still flopping around merrily in the lotus pond. Wang Ling stared at the black cat. No one noticed that its deep, obsidian-like pupils were blossoming with a different kind of splendor like a kaleidoscope. It had to be said that He Bufeng's transformation technique was quite superb. To be able to do this, he could definitely escape the detection of most people at the same realm as him. But unfortunately, a mere transformation technique couldn't escape the judgment of the heavenly eye at all. While He Bufeng was happily flopping around in the lotus pond, he was surprised to find that the water around him seemed to have become a lot bigger, and his field of view had changed dramatically. Even the black fur on his hands seemed to have disappeared. Strange. This situation seemed a little off. Then, after a few short seconds, He Bufeng stood up in the lotus pond with a stupefied expression on his face. Even his drenched little brother stood up valiantly and energetically. K. He Bufeng had never thought that he would turn back into a human. And what terrified He Bufeng the most was that even his clothes were gone. Wang Ling covered his eyes, which were stinging from the heat, and at the same time, he cursed in his heart. Who could tell him? Why the hell had He Bufeng's clothes disappeared? Getting rid of the fake and keeping the real was a little king thorough. It was a little painful to the eyes. There had to be a bug somewhere, right? This was an unexpected awkwardness for Wang Ling. He was a little regretful. The heavenly eye's passive skill wasn't something he could control. The ability to get rid of the fake and keep the real was indeed very good, and could help him identify a lot of false illusions. But it was clear that sometimes it wasn't a good thing to restore the real too thoroughly. At that moment, He Bufeng felt a little crazy and a little desperate. It was like using a transformation potion in a game, only to find out that all your top-notch equipment had been swallowed by the system. Furthermore, the feeling of his eggs getting cold in the wind gave him a sense of melancholy. He Bufeng covered his face and sank back into the lotus pond. He had never felt so ashamed before. There was no one around, and that punk little brother was still lurking in the distance, completely unaware of what was going on in front of him. He Bufeng braced himself and said to Wang Ling in a slightly pleading tone, "Classmate, can you help me find some clothes?" Wang Ling. After thinking for a moment, Wang Ling took off his coat and threw it on the side of the lotus pond. Then, he lowered his head and silently turned to leave. After all, he wasn't Super Chun, and there was no way he would be interested in a naked bro. A youngster with a buzz cut, who had a slightly melancholy temperament, was walking in the cherry blossom forest. He Bufeng watched Wang Ling's back as he sat in the cold lotus pond in a daze. He hadn't expected his transformation technique to fail so quickly, and even more so, he hadn't expected that the guy he was supposed to mess with would instead help him out at his most embarrassing moment. Crawling out of the lotus pond with a face full of shame, He Bufeng put on the blue coat that Wang Ling had given him. The sports uniform was longer than normal clothes, and it was just enough to cover He Bufeng's most embarrassing parts. It was a good thing that school wasn't over yet, otherwise there would be more people in the cherry blossom forest, and he would really be embarrassed. "Boss, it's all recorded." That punk little brother scuttled out from the side. K. What the hell is there to record? Delete it all. He Bufeng's face twitched as he recalled how he had seemed to be happily splashing water in the lotus pond when he had just turned into a human. He Bufeng felt like a retard. How could he keep this kind of video? Then this person, should we still mess with him? We should raise our hands to welcome such a student from another school with such a righteous view of the world. If it wasn't for this classmate Lei Feng, I would have completely lost face. As he Buffering spoke, he took off the punk little brother's pants and put them on. The breeze brushed against his bare thighs and light leg hair, making the punk little brother feel a little aggrieved. I'll have to thank this classmate Lei Feng later. He Buffing sighed, thinking of Tang Jingzi and this bunch of people who craved for the world to be in chaos. He deeply felt the difference in quality between the students of the two schools. He Buffing felt that he couldn't continue to fall like this. Number 59 High School Student Union had to be properly reorganized. The two of them stared in the direction that Wang Ling had disappeared in for a long time. Then, unknowingly, Wang Ling's great shielding spell came into play again. Almost at the same time, both of them realized an important problem. F***K. Wait a minute. This classmate Lei Feng. What the F***K was his name again? Chapter 46. Wang Ling absolutely wasn't someone who liked to play the role of Lei Feng. He Buffing had brought this upon himself. Wang Ling could ignore it and swagger away. But what father and mother Wang had taught him from a young age was that there should be a bottom line in everything you did. Leave a way out for everything, and it would be easier to meet again in the future. Although he Buffing was a delinquent, in the end, he wasn't like that bunch of heinous human-headed dogs from Shadowstream. Thus, in the end, Wang Ling had decided to keep the school uniform after considering the relationship between the two schools. Everyone knew that the relationship between number 59 High School and number 60 High School wasn't good. But when will there be an end to revenge? He didn't know what a mere school uniform could change, but he thought it was worth a try. After all, even number 59 High School's most troublesome director Xia had been won over by Old Antique. Anything was possible. Over at number 59 High School, someone's balls turned cold as the wind blew past their buttocks. Elsewhere, in the office of the General Administration of 100 Schools, Audiobook was feeling very sad today. In the eyes of outsiders, Audiobook, who had become the deputy director of the General Administration of 100 Schools at such a young age, was undoubtedly an enviable existence. But no one knew that the pressure on Audiobook himself was considerable. On one hand, this pressure came from the leader. The General Administration of 100 Schools controlled all the cultivation schools in Shanghai City, including kindergartens. The education bureaus of the major districts had to listen to the direct deployment of the General Administration of 100 Schools. And above the General Administration of 100 Schools was the Alliance of 10,000 Schools. It was under the direct jurisdiction of Secretary Sun Dakong, a leading cadre of the central government. The position of deputy director was neither a big nor a small one. But from Audiobook's point of view, sitting in this position was to receive guests. The director had reaped all the benefits, while he himself could only answer calls in the office. The pressure of a leader directly led to pressure at work, which made Audiobook feel even more bitter. On the other hand, the pressure also came from Audiobook himself. Audiobook was well aware of how he had gotten his position as deputy director. Furthermore, the most terrifying thing was that at the annual meeting every year, a few drunk leaders would drag him along to perform the sky-parting sword, move he had used to kill the sky-swallowing toad back then. In short, Audiobook felt very tired sitting in the position of deputy director. Due to the issue of their children's enrollment, many parents came to him to petition. The child's education was a major issue, and there was no way Audiobook wouldn't help. Of course, there were also quite a few parents who sent him red packets in private, but he didn't accept any of them. Audiobook felt that although he couldn't be rated as an honest and clean model worker, at least he could be considered an honest and upright person. He actually wanted to report his leader and throw caution to the wind. However, he did not have any evidence on hand, especially after the Anti-Corruption Department of Huaxiao Nation's Central Cultivation Bureau had issued 8 regulations and 6 prohibitions. All the leading officials had started to restrain themselves and no longer indulged in debauchery. There wasn't even a single dish at the banquet. The leaders took out abalone-flavored fasting pills from their pockets and put them in their mouths. Then, they began to drink tea and chat. Thus, it was even more impossible for Audiobook to find any evidence. Ever since number 60 high school's crushing defeat of the world-class killer organization Shadowstream, it had aroused widespread discussion in society. For the Spirit Sword exchange meet between number 59 high school and number 60 high school this time, the leaders of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had personally called Audiobook to express their fervent interest and concern. In fact, the most important thing was Lotus Sun's safety. After the assassination attempt by Shadowstream, it was said that the big boss of Huagua Water Curtain Group had directly called the central government. Audiobook didn't know exactly what they had talked about. But after that, the leaders of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had personally called Audiobook to inquire about all of Lotus Sun's activities at school. Just this morning, Audiobook had personally received a call from the higher-ups. Over the phone, Audiobook could guess the content of the conversation. It was most likely about safety. Shadowstream had lost so many first-class killers this time, and they definitely wouldn't let it go so easily. The Spirit Sword exchange meet between the two schools would be attended by leaders at all levels, and there would be many eyes and eyes. If security measures weren't in place, problems would inevitably arise. In fact, Audiobook had been sending people to keep an eye on them for the last 2 days, for fear that something would go wrong. If this job wasn't in place, the first person to get into trouble would be him, the deputy director who had assigned the task. Receiving guests and taking the blame. It sounded a little sad, but this was in fact the problem Audiobook was facing right now. It wasn't just his job, but also his current situation. That morning, right after the call with the leaders of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools, an unusual guest arrived at Audiobook's office in the afternoon. This person was very tall, and wore a black windbreaker that fitted him just right and a motorcycle helmet. At first glance, he didn't look like a big shot. But the moment he pushed open the office door, Audiobook was completely dumbfounded and almost cursed in his heart. Duh. Secretary Dakong? Sun Dakong, Director of Huaxiao Nation's General Education Administration, Secretary of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools. This old leader with an unfathomable realm was a figure whose every step he took in Jingzhou City. Audiobook hadn't had any direct contact with this legendary old leader, and had only seen him from afar at previous annual meetings. To be honest, Audiobook had a very deep impression of Secretary Dakong, so he had recognized the visitor at one glance. It was said that Secretary Sun Dakong was a very low-key person in private, and seeing him today, it really was as the rumors said F***K, a black windbreaker and a helmet. If one didn't know better, they would think it was takeout. Sun Dakong put down his motorcycle helmet and sat down unceremoniously in the guest chair as he sighed faintly. It's been so many years, but this place really hasn't changed at all. His voice was magnetic, and even more so had the tone of an old leader, and his words had a special charm to them. There were usually a lot of parents who came to the office to petition, and Audiobook had almost run out of tea leaves. He opened the jars, but didn't find anything good, and was instantly a little embarrassed. Sun Dakong smiled at Audiobook. No need to trouble Deputy Director Zhua, tea will do. I came uninvited today, so it's fine as long as Deputy Director Zhua doesn't blame me. Audiobook hurriedly poured Sun Dakong a cup of herbal tea. What are you saying, Secretary Dakong? If there's a problem, just give me a call. This is a special line for the people. I don't have this right. Sun Dakong chuckled. So I came in person today. I've already made arrangements for student Lotus Sun's safety. If you're worried, Secretary Dakong, that's not why I came to see you today. Sun Dakong waved his hand. With Deputy Director Zhua taking care of student Lotus Sun's safety, of course we can rest assured. The higher-ups have seen Deputy Director Zhua's achievements in the alliance of 100 schools in Songhai City over the years. A few days ago, if Deputy Director Zhua hadn't personally planned and arranged for the defense of number 60 high school to defeat Shadowstream, I'm afraid that it would have been the biggest terrorist attack in the history of our Huaxiao Nation's education sector. If it hadn't been for Deputy Director Zhua, It would have been very hard to predict the consequences. Ajwa. Then why did Secretary Dakong come to see me today? Number 60 High School's Spirit Sword Exchange meet is in 2 days. This time, I'll be there as a spectator on behalf of the higher-ups. I suddenly thought of this yesterday, and haven't told anyone before. It shouldn't be too late for me to come here and report to Deputy Director Zhua, right? Of course, it's enough for Deputy Director Zhua to keep this to himself. Give me an identity to participate in the event in the name of the General Administration of 100 schools. If too many people are alarmed, there's no point in mobilizing everyone. Sun Dakong spoke frankly with assurance, his expression extremely gentle. In short, it's just one sentence. Keep a low profile. Old leader, what are you talking about? Ajwa wiped at his cold sweat. He could already make the connection. If word of this ***king got out, all the leaders of number 59 high school and number 60 high school would go crazy. Furthermore, it wouldn't just be the school leaders. It might even directly alarm the leaders at the bureau level, and even the municipal level. Sun Dakong. This person's name was really too resounding. Forget about anything else, just the fact that his identity was revealed. People would tremble when they heard it. In the past, this secretary of the Alliance of 10,000 Schools had been one of the 10 most meritorious figures in the founding of Huaxiao Nation. He was an old general who had fought bravely on the ancient cultivation battlefield and made great contributions to the creation of the scientific cultivation era. At this thought, Ajwa's expression couldn't help drifting. Such a figure was actually going to participate in a spirit sword exchange meet between 2 ordinary high schools? Ajwa felt that this was really too inconceivable. Apart from this, there's one more thing. Sun Dakong sipped his tea. I wonder if Deputy Director Zhua still remembers the demon rampage 6 years ago? Chapter 47. Every time Ajwa heard about the demon rampage 6 years ago, he couldn't help trembling. Every year at the annual meeting, those drunk leaders would drag him along to perform the sky-parting sword. Ajwa's psychological shadow was already higher than the sky and deeper than the sea. So when he heard Sun Dakong bring up the past again, Ajwa could almost guess what Secretary Dakong was going to say next. Sure enough, this old leader, who had quite a personality, glanced at Ajwa and smiled. I heard that Deputy Director Zhua's sky-parting sword is a unique skill. Why don't you show it off on the day of the Spirit Sword Exchange meet? For a very long time, Ajwa was silent and didn't say anything. In the past, when those drunk old leaders had asked him to perform at the annual meetings, it had been very easy for him to find an excuse to refuse. After all, they had been a bunch of delirious drunkards. But now that the person sitting in front of him was making such a request, Ajwa really couldn't find a reason to refuse. First, he didn't dare. Second, he really didn't know how to do it. All these years, Ajwa had done a lot of research on the sky-parting sword. But until now, he hadn't come up with any results. What, is there a problem? Seeing that Ajwa was slow to speak, Sun Dakong smiled faintly. If it's really inconvenient, just pretend I didn't say anything. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing. I originally thought that as a senior from your number 60 high school, and a role model in the eyes of most young people, it would definitely be a good motivator if I could show off my ability and talent at such a public event. Old leader, don't misunderstand, that's not what I meant. Oh, it's fine as long as it's not like that, Sun Dakong replied swiftly, directly choking off the rest of Ajwa's words. Ajwa had wanted to ask if he could perform something else, without using the sky-parting sword, even if it was a boulder on his chest. But Sun Dakong's unquestionable and resolute attitude had already thoroughly dispelled this idea. This time, there was no way he could run away. Ajwa sighed inwardly, feeling a genuine pain in the ass. Now, he was in a very difficult situation. It was hard to get off the tiger. If he did this well, Secretary Sun Dakong would be happy, and he might be promoted. He could say goodbye to his position as the deputy director, who had been in charge of receiving guests for many years, and start a new life. But if he didn't do a good job, he was well aware that he would really have to say goodbye to this position. To be able to sit in this position at such a young age, it's really not easy. As he spoke, Sun Dakong suddenly got up and solemnly patted Audra on the shoulder, scaring him so much that he almost fell off his chair. I know you may have your concerns. You must think that you're too young and don't want to show off in front of an expert. You want to keep a low profile to avoid attracting attention, right? Let me tell you a story from the ancient cultivation battlefield. Sun Dakong said. Audra raised his head, and there was more vigor in his eyes. Back then, the last battle before the founding of our country, the Battle of Sherman. Most of the youngsters had only heard of legends regarding the ancient cultivation battlefield. This dusty history couldn't even be found in the history textbooks of middle and high schools, and it was only in university that one had a preliminary understanding of it. Audra wasn't a history major at university, but he had a basic understanding of the Battle of Sherman. That battle was really too famous. As Secretary Dakong recounted the story, his eyes welled up with crystalline tears, as if he was remembering many things. In that battle back then, the 7 demon gods from the gate between worlds bore down on us with overwhelming might. Together with Minister Shi Yuliang of the current Ministry of National Defense, we stood guard outside the stone gate of Enrich. Eyes wide, Audra listened quietly, being able to personally hear the person involved narrate the history. This wasn't an opportunity that everyone would have. Those were demon gods. They were so powerful, their godly might soaring to the sky, and they unleashed countless nomological laws. Heaven and earth lost color, and the phenomenon was astonishing. Even the sun was pressed down, and from hundreds of li away, one could see the blazing nomological flames above the stone gate. The leader of the demon gods was quite powerful. His entire body was resplendent with every move he made, and even heaven and earth resonated with him. On his own, Minister Shi Yuliang tried everything he could, but in the end, he was unable to contend with them. But this battle was already the last stop. In the Battle of Sherman, the task given to us by the higher-ups was to hold the pass. Even if we couldn't win, we couldn't back down in the slightest. Audra listened very attentively, and his thoughts drifted along with the old secretary's narration. He could already imagine the terrifying scene of the ancient cultivation battlefield, where the flames of war soared to the sky and godly might bore down on them. But now, standing in front of him and telling him this story, the seemingly middle-aged old secretary was already a living fossil. He had walked step by step from that era, witnessed the development of the times and scientific progress, and sat in his current position. This conversation revealed a sense of age. It made Audra feel as if it were a lifetime ago. In the end, we were all exhausted and fell at the pass of the stone gate. Only Department Head Yu Liang stood up alone. He ignited his own divine blood, using the supreme being bone within his body as the price to summon the divine artifact Gao Shaoqin. He played a divine song, replenishing everyone's strength. He also raised his own potential to the limit. In the end, he killed 7 gods in a row. He defended the stone gate and laid the foundation for the founding of Huaxiao Nation. But Minister Shi survived in the end, said Audra. The old secretary smiled. That's right. He survived. At that time, even the tombstone had been set up, and he was already buried. Who knows? This guy's pet bird Little Red threw a divine grass at his grave to nourish his vitality. But in the end, he crawled out of the grave on his own. Don't you think it's funny, Audra? In this world, the number of people who could call this old minister this guy could really be counted on one hand. What do you understand after listening to the story? Sun Dakong asked Audra. The old secretary's story wasn't told for nothing. It was very important to summarize it. After listening to the story, Audra felt a lot of emotion in his heart. The old secretary used this story to tell me that I need perseverance in doing things, and that I mustn't give up until the last moment. I have to learn a lot from Minister Shi Yuliang and pay tribute to his tenacious vitality, right? You're thinking too much. Secretary Sun rolled his eyes. I want to tell you that if you have any talent, hurry up and show it. Don't hide it. Don't be like Minister Shi, hiding a big move and only using it at the last moment. In the end, you almost lost yourself. You're not Ultraman. Once you had a chance to show off in front of you. If you can show it off, don't wait until you lose it before it's too late for regrets. Chapter 48. Ever since the Peiyuan district branch of the Pengxi gang had collapsed, Madame Dong had led a group of old men and women to establish the General Administration of Harmony. From then on, the Peiyuan district's chaos of racketeering and all sorts of acts that caused chaos in public order seemed to disappear without a trace. No one wanted to be blocked by a group of old men and women on their way to work, forcing them to recite the core values of the cultivation doctrine and the 8 honors and 8 shames to the little red book. Just like that, the people who illegally parked on the street disappeared, and even the people who ran the red light disappeared. In just a few short days, the General Administration of Harmony had escorted no less than 1,000 repeat thieves to the local General Administration of Cultivation in Peiyuan District, eating until the bottom of the detention center's granary. All the policemen at the General Administration of Cultivation worked overtime to take notes and leave a criminal record. It was as if the local cultivation police station of Peiyuan District had become a subsidiary department of old Madame Dong of the General Administration of Harmony. The most infuriating thing was that the police couldn't say anything, because it had to be admitted that ever since the General Administration of Harmony appeared, the quality of Peiyuan District had indeed improved a lot in all aspects. Moreover, this group of old men and women were very shrewd. They did not leave any traces behind. On the surface, they did not seem to be breaking the law. Even if they pulled someone into a corner and beat him up, they would choose a blind spot. In short, Madame Dong was completely famous. When old Madame Dong walked around Peiyuan District now, even the traffic police couldn't help trembling when they saw her, and would respectfully address her as Miss Dong. However, Miss Dong herself was rather dissatisfied with the current situation of the General Administration of Harmony. That morning, Madame Dong clasped her hands behind her back and strolled leisurely like an old leader who had been behind the scenes for a long time as she arrived at the secret stronghold of the General Administration of Harmony. This base was originally an ordinary abandoned factory, waiting to be rented and transferred. The rent was very cheap, so Madame Dong and several senior leaders of the General Administration of Harmony each took out some of their retirement pay and pooled their money together to buy this factory. In just 2 days, the idle items in the factory had been swept clean, and the inside was divided into several areas. First, the peaceful reporting area. The people of Peiyuan District could spontaneously report uncivilized behavior in society, and the General Administration of Harmony would lend a helping hand as long as it touched on the core values of cultivation. Second, the Harmony Entertainment District. This area was specially set aside for the old men and women of the headquarters to dance in the square, so as not to disturb the rest of the people nearby. Old Madame Dong had also purchased a soundproof system at her own expense and set 2 regular square dance songs. The main song was Superstars in Troubled Times, and the closing song was Gokura Kajodo, which had a domineering tone with a hint of joy. Third, a harmonious meeting room. As the name suggested, this conference room was used by Madame Dong to convene high-level leaders for emergency assignments. In addition to these 3 areas, there were 2 small areas left, which were the Harmony Fitness Room and Madame Dong's independent office. As usual, the first thing Madame Dong did when she arrived at the office was to immediately go to the bathroom to get a bucket of water. Then, she took a clean white cloth and began to carefully wipe the stone that was enshrined in front of the desk. From an outsider's point of view, there was nothing strange about this stone, but for everyone in the General Administration of Harmony, it had extraordinary significance, because it was engraved with the 24 incantations. It was the one Wang Ling had left behind back then. While she was wiping, an old man with a red scarf on his arm came to the office door and knocked on it. "Miss Dong, are you busy?" The old man's surname was Zhang, and he was Madame Dong's right-hand man. A red armband was the symbol of a high-level leader in the General Administration of Harmony. Madame Dong didn't say anything as she focused on wiping the stone. 5 minutes later, she wrung out the white cloth and threw it into the bucket of water. She straightened the stone on the desk and then lit 3 incense sticks in the stove in front of the stone. During this process, Grandpa Zhang didn't say anything as he stood upright in front of the door. After silently waiting for Madame Dong to finish, she slowly turned around and looked at the door as she said indifferently, "Come in and talk." "Any new developments?" Madame Dong asked as she stared fixedly at the stone on the desk. "No, we haven't received any news from the director yet. Could he have abandoned us?" the old man replied. "That's impossible. Back then, the director left this stone for us. He gave us the confidence and hope in social security. We abide by the core values of cultivation and adhere to the principle of coming from the people to the people. We serve the people wholeheartedly." Saying this, Madame Dong became excited, and there was a look of sudden realization in her deep eyes. "I know. It must be that our harmony isn't strong enough and hasn't moved the director." "I think so too." Grandpa Zhang nodded in agreement. Madame Dong frowned. "But given our current financial situation, it's not enough to spread the team to other districts. We already don't have enough manpower in Peiyuan district." Grandpa Zhang also sighed. The new old men and women only know how to play fight the landlord and mahjong all day long. This is already a serious violation of the Iron Community rules of our General Administration of Harmony. The newcomers don't know the rules, so just teach them a little. You have to be patient. Is the financial statement out yet? Let me calculate how much money we're still short of. Grandpa Zhang was silent for a moment. The statement will be sent here soon. I don't think Miss Dong needs to worry about funds for the time being. In the morning, an enthusiastic member of the public sent us a bank card. The funds in it are already enough for our initial operations. Madame Dong had a strange expression on her face. Could it be that this was a card from the director? Have you found out where this card came from? It shouldn't have come from the director. We're still investigating its origin. Apart from a bank card, this person also sent a letter stating the purpose of this card, which was to subsidize the General Administration of Harmony's expenses. Grandpa Zhang carefully recalled for a moment, then his eyes widened as if he remembered something. "Oh, that's right. Auntie Lee from the technical department found a faint watermark on the envelope, which looked like a string of numbers. Perhaps it's a clue that the other party left for us." Madame Dong's eyes turned as she cupped her chin and thought for a moment. This should be a test that the other party left for us. If we don't even have this bit of reverse investigation ability, our General Administration of Harmony would be too degrading. We have to find out where this letter came from as soon as possible. "Yes, Miss Dong." Grandpa Zhang nodded. "Oh, that's right. What's this string of numbers?" Madame Dong asked. "You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.